Oh, got it.
Please bear with us as we go through the whole meeting. We've been practicing, but it's not straightforward how we actually do this. So first, I would like to call to order. So Commission Secretary, can you do can you do the roll call, please?
Of course. Commissioner Young. Commissioner Young, if you can turn on your webcam and audio. Okay, he is here. We just can't hear him.
And I will work with him offline.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis? Okay, he's here. He does not have audio as well. Vice Chair Kilborn?
Present.
Thank you. And Chair Keller?
Present.
Thank you. Roll call is now complete.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for being here. I'd like to thank the commissioners, the city staff, all participants, and anyone in the public for being with us today. Again, it's a very special situation, and I really thank everybody for making the effort to be here. So first, I would like to ask Mr. Hagemark, are there any changes to the agenda?
Chair Keller, no changes to the agenda.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So first, we're going to go through a training for the water commissions and the public on the GoToWebinar platform. So I'm going to switch off and pass it on to the commission secretary so she can give us that training.
Thank you, Chair Keller and commissioners and members of the public. I'll be giving a training on the GoToWebinar platform and the do's and don'ts. So in GoToWebinar, there are 3 roles. The first one is organizer. The organizer creates the meeting. They are kind of the Wizard of Oz of GoToWebinar and can communicate with all participants. They have the power to end the webinar, and they also have the power to start the webinar. Panelists. Panelists are most of our boards and commissioners, members, board and commission members, staff, and applicants. They may chime in, mute, unmute themselves at any time, and they have the option to share the webcam. Attendees. These are members of the public, and they are in listen-only mode, and they are not able to share their webcam. Okay, the do's of GoToWebinar. Do's. Use available headsets or headphones to ensure best audio from home. Close other programs on your computer/laptop, including alerts, email pop-ups, and browsers. And consider your meeting setup. The lighting. Is the lighting good? Low traffic area, and reducing distractions and noisy areas. Always mute yourself when you're not speaking, and always turn your webcam off when you are not speaking. The don'ts of GoToWebinar. Participants and organizers never share your meeting invitation or webinar link with anyone else. This reduces vulnerability to hacking live meetings. This invitation is specific to your role as a board or commission member, which gives you special audio and video privileges during a meeting. Members of the public will be able to view the meeting via a different link. Boards and commission members shall never use the chat function between other board commission members. Chatting between board and commission members is a Brown Act violation. Commission members should only use the chat function to contact the organizer or the city attorney. Remote public hearings best practices. All votes will be roll called, alphabetical order and reverse alphabetical order for comments and responses. When a commission member is called upon by the chair to speak, turn your audio on, microphone icon, and webcam, camera icon, on if you have one. Commission chair will instruct if the audio/webcam must be turned on or off. As a panelist, commission members may chime in by turning their audio and webcam on and requesting the chair's permission to speak. If in the webinar but experiencing technical difficulties, contact the organizer. Staff will require consultants to join the webinar prior to starting the scheduled meeting for sound/webcam check. Attendee participation. If an attendee chooses to dial in by phone, only then they remain in a listen-only mode. They do not have any visuals, ability to raise their hand, or be unmuted because they did not join the software. To participate with full functionality, an attendee must join the software on their computer or via the GoToWebinar mobile app available for iOS, Android, Windows mobile devices. How to make an oral public comment. Oral comments may only be made with GoToWebinar during the public comment period. To indicate that you would like to make a public comment, click the raise lower your hand icon, image shown on the right, in the control panel. The organizer will notify you when it's your turn to speak. You will have 2 minutes to speak, and no time will be donated from another speaker. It is recommended that speakers keep a personal timer handy. Other ways to submit public comment. Prior to the meeting, you may submit public comments via email to me, myself, rbecerra@santabarbaraca.gov. All public comments submitted via email will be provided to the commission and will become part of the public record. And time for questions. I don't see any questions from members of the public. Staff, do you have any questions? Okay, I'll turn it back to you, Chair Keller.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm trying to get my camera back on. There it is. So thank you very much. So I would like to now open it up for public comments on any items that are not on the agenda. So if you have any, if anyone in the public wants to make a comment and has submitted it ahead of time or want to submit one now, please do so. Commissioner Secretary, can you please check if we have any comments?
Sorry to interrupt. Give me just 1 second here. Bradley, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So again, Rachel, are there any comments?
I do not see anyone wanting to make a public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to proceed now with item 6, which is the consent items. We actually only have the minutes from the previous meeting in our consent calendar. Are there any other items that people want to pull for discussion? Do you want to have any discussion on the previous meeting minutes? You're muted. Dave, do you have a comment? Commissioner Davis?
Dave, you are
Okay.
unmuted. If you're having an audio issue, go ahead and switch to telephone in the panel and dial in.
I'll move that we approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Having this motion, can you please do the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis, Vice Chair Kilborn,
Yes.
and Chair Keller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we move on to the next item. So now we're going to go into the administrative items. And the first one is a very timely one, with the Water Resources COVID-19 response. So I would like to ask Mr. Hagemer to please give us the presentation on what are the expected issues with the COVID-19 response.
Chair Keller, Commissioners, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, and here to give you guys an update on everything that's been going on in the last couple of weeks. It's been obviously a pretty significant change in the way we do business, but I'm feeling at this point confident about the direction we're headed and want to share with you everything that's going on. Next slide. So we'll start off, I guess right now we are planning to do a water supply update in May to the Water Commission and City Council. So that's coming, but I just sneak peek at that. The water supplies remain sufficient to meet the community's needs for the next 3 years. One last thing we have to worry about right now. Can't reiterate this enough. Our drinking water remains safe and reliable. I think that's really important. We've seen people run on water at the grocery stores, and there's no need. The water that we have always delivered to homes continues to be safe and reliable. We'll get into that a little later. The city's wastewater continues to be treated and safely released back into the environment, so we have no concerns there. We do disinfect our treated wastewater before it's released 1.5 miles offshore. We've confirmed with our suppliers that all wastewater treatment chemicals, they're not anticipated to be any disruptions. We've had quite a few reach out to us to let us know that they have been given priority by both state and federal governments to make sure that those chemicals can continue to be delivered, as they're critical to not only the city, but to all water and wastewater treatment plants across the country. We've also completed a continuity of operations plan for water resources, which really dives into the details of how we would and will respond as the pandemic continues to unfold. The city has plans in place to keep its operators safe and to secure materials. And with that, depending on the availability of operators, how we would prioritize operations. So that's kind of our play sheet. And then the city's water and wastewater operators continue to be dedicated, showing up every day to work, and are eager to make sure that they complete their essential services duties. For those operators that can work remotely or staff that can work remotely, we certainly have accommodated that, but there's a lot of activities that certainly require their physical presence. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, we've also confirmed that our local contractors are available to assist us with emergency needs should they arise. Items such as water main breaks, sewer main repairs, that such. We wanted to make sure that they will be responsive, and they have confirmed that they are available and standing by. As far as our capital improvement program, we have been making changes to that. One of the most visible changes has been the water main replacement project. That's pretty much going on all the time. We have put that on a temporary hold, as it does have impacts at times where we need to shut the water off for a couple hours to do various tie-overs. And we didn't feel like right now, with everybody in sheltered in place at home, that was an appropriate thing to be doing. So that's been put on delayed, but there are a lot of capital projects behind the scenes, work at pump stations and reservoirs that is continuing to move forward. And likely the public won't see much in the way of that, but you'll also see city staff out there continuing to do maintenance on valves and cleaning of the sewers. So that's an ongoing operation. As you'll see later in the presentation today, we are taking our first run at estimates of the financial impacts of COVID-19, and in particular, the loss of revenue from our commercial and industrial users, as well as potential impacts from our customers who are obviously going to be struggling too, with a lot of people being laid off or sent home for a while. Next slide. So as far as the public-facing programs that we have, I just wanted to give you an update on that. We have deferred the sewer lateral inspection program. So anybody who was in that process has now, their timeline has been put on hold. So, and in addition to that, we're not sending out any new notices to our customers. We are watching that closely. There are some, as we're continuing to maintain our system, if we see something that does have an imminent threat to public health, such as roots really plugged up a lateral, we will reach out to a homeowner and work with them to get that repaired so that they don't have a private spill, nor do we see a public spill from that. There are customers that do want to continue to move forward with getting their sewer lateral inspected or repaired. City staff are here, and we're eager to continue to support that because we believe it's an imperative that our sewer lateral infrastructure be maintained because it's the only way we can keep the wastewater in the pipe. We have suspended water shutoffs during the pandemic, so we will not be shutting off anybody's water for any reason other than a major leak. And again, wanting to work with that homeowner to address the leak and get their water service turned back on. So we're not shutting off water service for non-payment at this point. We're also doing virtual water checkups. So for those who are needing assistance with reducing their water bills, particularly if they're finding themselves with a reduced income and really want to have a better understanding, we want them to reach out to us, and I'll have some numbers at the end of the presentation to talk about there, but give us a call. We're standing by and wanting to assist our customers in any way we can. And then our public outreach campaign, I want to go into that a little bit, but I did want to give a special thanks to Rincon Broadcasting, which is in this pandemic has reached out and offered some free airtime for some ads. So I'm going to walk you through some of those ads. Next slide. So key public outreach messages right now is people's water is safe and reliable, and we keep hitting on this. Our treatment technology right now removes and disinfects all viruses, including COVID-19. And again, we're ensuring the safety of our staff so that we can make sure that we can reliably operate our key infrastructure. So you'll be seeing messaging both in radio, TV, and ads, making sure that that's clear to the public. We don't want, there's enough to worry about these days, and this is something they should not have to worry about. Next slide. We are here for you. Our staff are committed. They are essential service workers. They are showing up every day. We have folks working 24/7 to make sure that the city's water and wastewater operations continue to move forward. And again, wanting to reiterate that with the community, one less thing they have to worry about. We are focused on making sure those essential services continue. Next slide. We're also here for you. We understand that people are going through some incredibly challenging financial times. If you are struggling with your utility bill, we do request that you reach out to our utility billing office as soon as possible. The number here, 805-564-5343, so that we can work with you. Our staff are trained and to help work through a payment plan that works with your budget. There is some requirements that are part of state law that don't allow us to just forgive water usage or water bills, but we do have some tools that we can use to come up with a payment plan that might fit your budget. And I think also with that, we want to work with you that maybe there's opportunities to help you better understand your water usage and reduce that in the future, and potentially options to look at your trash bill, trash service, to see if there's any way that that can be reduced in future bills. Next slide. Big message coming out of our wastewater group, and it's just a rising problem around the country, is wipes. People are buying wipes left and right from the stores to try and clean surfaces and hands, and they do not belong in the city's wastewater system. They do not belong in your toilet. Please, they need to go in the trash. We've already had one property owner on the Mesa who unfortunately wipes got in and plugged up his lateral and caused a spill. Thousands of dollars in damages, not to mention the raw wastewater that was introduced into the public. So we were able to mobilize city staff to go out and help out with the cleanup in the public right of way, but needless to say, this does not need to happen. Wipes, paper towels, please keep them out of the sewer system. Only flush the three P's: pee, poop, and paper. Everything else is trash. Next slide. So with that, we're dedicated to ensuring our critical systems continue to operate and serve our community throughout this pandemic. We've got a list of questions here: utility billing, water quality, lab, and our water conservation number. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to us. We're here to help. And with that, I'm available for comments or questions.
I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Hagermark. Yes, well, let me just thank him. Thank you, Mr. Hagermark. And also, I would like to personally, and on behalf of the Water Commission, thank all the essential personnel that are still keeping our water safe and running. I also want to thank all the city staff for their very professional behavior during these circumstances. So with that, Commissioner Young, if you have a question.
Thank you very much. Just curious how we know that our treatment technology is actually removing COVID-19. Have we done any tests ourselves at the treatment plant?
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, are you referring to potable water or our wastewater?
Wastewater.
Okay. So at our wastewater treatment plant, before we discharge anything out into the ocean, we chlorinate the effluent, treated effluent, and then we dechlorinate it so that that doesn't have a residual impact on the ocean environment. But chlorine has been shown, and that's what people are using to clean their hands and counters, has been shown to be effective in disinfecting the virus.
Okay, so no specific testing on wastewater
We-
effluent to confirm that?
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, we are undergoing those testing, but it's more of we're working with outside agencies, including UCSB, to understand how many in our community are affected by COVID-19 and the volume coming in. But that's more to just try and gauge the magnitude of the problem, not necessarily to gauge whether our process is effective in disinfecting the virus.
Okay. And then as to our water supply that goes through processing and then disinfection, have we done any specific testing on the water that is actually supplied to residents in terms of whether COVID-19 is being removed, assuming it's there?
Right. It's a good question. I think there's a very low chance that it's there, but we've been in conversations with the EPA, DDW, or Drinking Water Department of Drinking Water state level, that the processes that we have instituted have shown to be 100% effective in removing strains of that same virus. Although this is a mutation of that, it's our processes that we have in place are effective in that removal.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
One comment question, or maybe just something to clarify when you're talking about the flushable wipes. I think we want to also message that even though they're called flushable wipes, certain ones, that those are also not appropriate to flush.
Yes.
Commissioner Kilboard, thank you so much. Yeah, we're rather infuriated with some of the marketing that's going on out there, calling wipes flushable. None of them are flushable. Absolutely not. None of them break down, and I feel like they've exposed themselves as a potential litigation from that for homeowners that do flush that and end up with some major challenges in their laterals. So we're doing our best to push back on that and try and make sure that's clear to the public. But yes, that messaging on the packaging is inaccurate. No wipes are flushable.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, if there are any further questions, I would like to see if there's any public comment that we may have at this point on this specific item. So, Commissioner Secretary, are there any comments?
Chair Keller, no public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any further opinions or questions? Okay, that concludes this item. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hagemer, for that presentation. Very timely. So our next item is the review of the Enhanced Urban Water Management Plan process. So we're moving into our new planning process for our long-term water supplies. And we'll have Ms. Corey from the city's water staff give us a presentation on where we are on the process. Ms. Corey?
Good morning, Chair Keller and Water Commissioners. My name is Dakota Corey, and I'm the Water Supply Analyst for the city. I'm going to give you a broad overview of our long-term water supply planning efforts here at the city, which we've branded Water Vision Santa Barbara. Next slide, please. The goal of this presentation is to give you a high-level overview of the project and to ask you to endorse our approach to stakeholder engagement at the end of the presentation. You'll see in your agenda packet that we've included a communications and engagement plan, which provides more detail on how we plan to engage the public in this important process. I'm going to start with a broad overview of the project, and then I'm going to hand the presentation over to Tiffany Meyer, who's our engagement lead from Water Systems Consulting, or WSC, and she's going to provide more details on the stakeholder engagement plan for this project. Finally, at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers, and I'll have on the line Jeff Seitel, who's the project lead for Water Systems Consulting, and also Joshua Hagmark, our Water Resources Manager. Next slide, please. So first, let's just do a broad overview of the project as a whole, what its purpose is, and what it will provide to the city. Next slide. As you know, Santa Barbara has one of the most diverse water supply portfolios in the state, with 8 distinct water supply sources. This diversity in our water supplies has been a huge asset to the city in helping us respond in times of drought. It makes our water supply quite resilient. On the other hand, this complex water supply portfolio that we have makes planning for our water supply situation in the future more complex. For example, some of our water supplies are more inexpensive, but they're also less reliable during a time of drought. On the other hand, we have supplies that are more expensive, but also much more reliable. Further still, we have supplies that we need to invest in capital improvements in order to get the full benefit of their volume. We also have supplies that are more or less affected by environmental or water quality regulations. As we explore future options for our water supply portfolio, these characteristics, as well as our community's values around water supply, are going to be taken into consideration. Next slide, please. This slide gives an overview of the project objectives of Water Vision Santa Barbara. And the slide is kind of small in text, so I'm going to go ahead and read through it for you so that we can all hear what those objectives are. Water Vision Santa Barbara will define a diverse, reliable, and resilient water supply portfolio that provides safe water to the entire community, even during an extended drought. It will provide an adaptable roadmap for the city's current and future supply needs. It will conduct an open and transparent stakeholder process. It will manage costs and affordability. It will prepare a robust analysis of current and future supplies, considering resilience and adaptability to climate change, natural disasters, and other changing conditions. It will elevate the community's awareness of the importance of water supply diversity and resiliency through effective outreach, engagement, and education. And finally, Water Vision Santa Barbara will deliver an enhanced urban water management time on schedule with the state's mandated requirements. Next slide, please. As you know, in the past, the city has had two primary water supply planning documents. Our long-term water supply plan, which was last updated in 2011 in support of the general plan, and then our urban water management plans, which we complete every 5 years and submit to the California Department of Water Resources as required by the state. With the complex nature of the challenges moving forward with our water supply situation here in Santa Barbara, it's important that this next long-term water supply planning effort really dive deep and take a look at all of the opportunities we have available to us. Therefore, this process is going to look different than the way that we've analyzed our water supply options in the past. We're using a triple bottom line approach to look at the economics, social, and environmental characteristics of each of our future water supply portfolios. We're also using a robust stakeholder engagement process that allows us to really understand our community's values around water supply as we make decisions for the next 30 years. In the end, we hope to deliver one final report, which we're calling an enhanced urban water management plan, which will lay the groundwork for how we manage our water supplies for the next 30 years. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and move to the next slide. This is just more of an overview of the process. As I mentioned before, we have one of the most diverse water supply portfolios in the state, with 8 different water supply sources originating both from Northern California and locally in groundwater. Go ahead and move to the next slide. We have several changes facing our water supply moving forward. Things like climate change, the potential for natural disasters, environmental health regulations, seawater intrusion of our groundwater basins, and the need to support our quality of life in Santa Barbara moving forward. These diverse challenges are what makes this water supply planning effort so important. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the 5 steps to Water Vision Santa Barbara, and the text is kind of small, so I'm going to go ahead and read those steps, starting in the upper left-hand corner. You'll see that step 1 is to confirm our future water supply goals. Moving across the slide to the right, step 2 is to evaluate our existing water supply portfolio. Step 3 is to develop future water supply portfolios. Step 4 is to finalize our future water supply portfolio that makes the most sense for our community. And then 5, we'll document this process in an adaptable plan that will guide our efforts to managing our water supplies for the next 30 years. You'll see in the lower left-hand corner that we're currently in step 1. There's a little orange triangle that says we are here. I also want to point out that we're going to be coming back to Water Commission to engage you in this planning process at least 3 more times at key decision points. We also have several other public meetings set up to engage the public and our city council throughout the process. At each time, we will provide an update on our stakeholder engagement efforts to help you reach a decision that you're confident in the end in recommending adoption of this plan. Next slide, please. And here I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Tiffany Meyer, who is our engagement specialist from Water Systems Consulting, and she's going to give a more detailed outline of how we're engaging the public in this important plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota, and thank you for having me, commissioners. I just wanted to acknowledge I enjoyed our short conversations last month as we kicked this project off, and it's good to be back talking with you again. Next slide, please. So as all of you know, Santa Barbara has a long history of making water supply decisions that, as best we can, reflect the values of its community. And this project is definitely has that same intention. Yet it also aims to go further. As Dakota was stressing, the approach of analyzing and developing that future portfolio takes a triple bottom line approach. And in our engagement approach, we're taking things a step further as well, trying to create more deliberate opportunities for stakeholders to inform those decisions. And as best we can to surface any unforeseen inequities or impacts of decisions well in advance. And with COVID-19 as our immediate reality, we've successfully transitioned the first few months of those engagement experiences from in-person workshops to a virtual setting. And that's designed, of course, to protect the health of all involved, but also to keep the project on schedule and to ensure that those experiences remain meaningful for participants. So thankfully, I bring quite a bit of experience in designing and leading virtual engagement for projects like these. So I could confidently say that the team is in good hands, especially as we move to that virtual environment. Go ahead, next slide. So in thinking about our approach to stakeholder engagement, we've divided all stakeholders into the 4 groups you see here. And each group will be engaged a little differently based on the role that they play in the project. So reading from left to right, the now 26-member Water Vision stakeholder group, as well as the general public, their role is really to share their perceptions of the community's values and needs. And we want to use that to inform project decisions. Water Commission, of course, your role is to advise City Council on those water policy decisions, on that final water portfolio. And City Council's role is to make that final decision for the future water portfolio in that adaptable implementation plan. So if we do our job well with engagement, Water Commission and City Council will have confidence in that final decision, confidence that it reflects the long-term values and needs of the community while also meeting the project goals. In turn, stakeholders will not only be more aware of how water policy decisions are made, and as Dakota was mentioning, the value of a diverse and resilient water supply, but they'll even be advocating for that plan that the city has approved and adopted and their role in its success, especially in the area of conservation. Next slide, please. So what activities will get us there? Well, we've divided those activities into the 3 you see here. We're going to use 5 interactive and educational workshops for that stakeholder group, and I'll talk a little bit more in a second about who's in that stakeholder group and why. So 5 interactive workshops beginning this evening with our first webinar for that group. And we'll also use 2 educational workshops for the general public. In those workshops, we're going to curate their input on very specific topics. And we're going to summarize their input and deliver that back to Water Commission and City Council in a timely way. So once again, it can inform those key decisions at specific project milestones. That summary of stakeholder input will also be made public by publishing it to the project website. In addition to those workshops, designated public meetings and community-wide outreach activities will help keep stakeholders informed. It will help raise awareness of where their water comes from, the importance of a diverse water supply, and ideally, it's going to build trust in those resulting decisions. In fact, we see education as kind of playing a consistent role in our approach because, quite frankly, this work can be really complicated. If you're not a professional in the water industry, there's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of technical terminology. So we want to work hard to de-jargon our conversations and our outreach, the content inside of our workshops, and even inside those public meeting presentations so we can meet the public where they are. Next slide, please. So the next two slides are really, they're also included in your communication engagement plan. However, they're updated as of Tuesday because we got some great input from City Council for some additions to this group. But I wanted to show you the deliberate diversity that now 26 member stakeholder group has, and a little bit about our approach in arriving at this list. We work with the city to identify now 9 segments of constituents, speaking to the broad uses and users of water, as well as those with proximity to the potential challenges and issues facing our water supply. And in looking at those 9 segments, we then invited now 22 organizations, and we've added 4 more we will be inviting for a total of 26. Most of those individuals they're all community leaders representing these segments, but most of them are also Santa Barbara residents. Next slide, please. Now, as you can see from this list, it provides a little more detail of the specific organizations that have committed to participate. And in yellow, you'll see the 4 that we've added since the City Council meeting. These are additions that they've recommended. So you can see that there's a deliberate diversity across these different segments. Some of those groups are smaller, agriculture, water users, and tribes, just because of the percentage of their representation within the community. But across the others, there's a pretty consistent number of organizations represented. Now, if you feel that we've left any critical voice or perspective out of this group, we of course want to know, and we'll take that back to City Council to make that recommendation. But as we consider adding any additional organizations, we want to be cautious because we want to keep that group size manageable. We've kind of reached that tipping point edge of manageability at 26. But we also, even more importantly, want to avoid disrupting the equity across the voices represented. If we suddenly had 5 more organizations that were speaking to kind of the same group of constituents, then that equity could be disrupted. So that's just something we want to be thoughtful about moving forward. Next slide, please. Now, beyond the recommended additions from City Council you saw on the previous slide, we want to acknowledge that the question was also raised by a water commissioner about the possible inclusion of the planning commission member being added to the stakeholder group. And as you go, if you could go back to the last slide, you can see that we have under land use, we have included the City of Santa Barbara Parks and Recreation Commission. So that was partly why that question was raised. Alternatively, the question was raised of maybe we shouldn't include any commissioners at all. And so I wanted to kind of bring that back into our Q&A. We did decide to include Parks and Recreation Commission largely because the parks are such a predominantly large water customer for the city. And so we did land on including them, but I wanted to give you that insight of the reason. So moving on to the next slide. And the final slide. At this point, we want to open it up for questions, and I'll turn it back to Joshua Hagmark to facilitate that Q&A with the commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Commissioner Davis, do you have a question? We can't hear you. So I think the point was made about including the planning commission. I'm a member of the planning commission, so a planning commission commissioner. And so I think that would make sense to me to have someone represented. It wouldn't change too much the overall presence of someone like that. So I think that would, to me, it makes sense to have it, but I'd like to hear from other commissioners how they feel about that. It's really another citizen, but it's a citizen that's well informed about the issues in terms of planning. And of course, planning, because of its activities, has a significant implication on water use. And they may have some thoughts and additional ideas that they may be providing. So I think to me, it makes sense to include them.
Chair Keller, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager. To that point, certainly we tried to include a pretty comprehensive list. We are working very closely with community development staff. They are updating the general plan, the city's general plan, to reflect some of the state's requirements now for housing. And so with that, we'll be working side by side with them over the next year as they update their general plan to confirm and will affirm that we have sufficient water to meet those needs. I have no reservations with going to and presenting kind of a check-in with the Planning Commission as a whole and getting feedback. Our intent with that group, in particular the stakeholder group, and I am a little disappointed it's grown as big as it is. I guess I'm concerned that we, and not that adding one more is gonna, but it's just being able to have that meaningful engagement. The intent with that group was to really make sure that we were hearing from all aspects of our community about the concerns and issues that they're thinking about. And to that end, we've got certainly realtors, contractors, architects. So we have all these representatives in the community that I believe will be able to channel a lot of the concerns and issues that I think a planning commission member would also bring to it. So I feel that the voice is there. The concerns should be raised and heard. But certainly if the commission feels strongly about adding a planning commissioner, I would be happy to accommodate that as well.
Yeah. Just on my behalf, I don't feel strongly. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I agree. And I agree actually that we do want to keep that group focused. And if we have too many people, then you begin to lose some of that. And there's a little bit of a correlation between the people who you've mentioned, the other groups that are related to planning. And so that, that could raise that voice more than others. So I think it's maybe good to maybe follow what we have right now. That's fine with me.
And we did have a lot of conversation about the Parks and Rec commissioner being involved. Keep in mind that we categorize them as land use because the city, when you really look at the total square footage of city parks in the city, it is probably the largest land user in town. And so we went back and forth. We had talked about, some engagement with their staff, but who could represent really the interests, the land use interests of parks? Because as we knew when we went through the drought, street trees, that is a huge part of our infrastructure. And we were making some really tough decisions during the drought around how do we protect these street trees. And so to that interest, we couldn't quite figure out who the right person to represent that was. And that's when we ultimately settled on the Parks and Rec Commission member to represent that particular interest, because it didn't seem appropriate for a staff person to represent that interest.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners?
Okay, could you hear me? Can you hear me on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank, and let me mute my computer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank Tiffany and staff for putting out my question to council the other day, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate Arturo's comments. I don't feel strongly I just don't believe that the commissioners should be on the panel. And as Joshua has outlined that they're going to be working with community development staff to get all the technical information for the study, and therefore no need for a planning commissioner. I don't understand why that it isn't the same for Parks and Rec. A Parks and Rec commissioner is not going to bring the water demand information, the if you will, the administrative and or operational questions which are there. I see it as being equal. My argument would be that have no commissioners, let this be a citizens committee, and then again, if Parks and Rec Commission want to have input later on in the process, like the Planning Commission or anybody else, they could do that. So my vote would basically be no commissioners, or add the Planning Commission. And the argument for the Planning Commission is housing is probably one of the most critical issues in this community. And in fact, as going forward, housing is going to be a policy issue, not a technical issue from staff. And to have the discussion relative to the housing question coming from a planning commissioner would be as strong as the advocate for park use and water use from a park commissioner. So again, for what it's worth, I would rather see none at all, no commissioners, this be a citizen committee. But if they were to be there, I think the addition of the planning commission makes a lot of sense. And again, I want to thank Tiffany and staff for basically putting out my question to council in a very, very positive way. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Other commissioners have any questions, comments? Do you want to have say any opinions on whether we should have commissioners or not from other commissions? Yes, Commissioner Kilburn.
I don't have any comments. I just wanted to thank them for the presentation, putting all this together. I am glad that we are getting community stakeholder involvement, and I don't necessarily have an opinion on other commissioners at this point, but I am interested to hear Commissioner Davis's comments about that as something to think about.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Young?
Yeah, I don't have any strong opinions one way or the other. So I think Dave adequately expressed kind of both sides of this for me, and I think that the way staff is going to pursue this, I think is fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hagemark, do you think you have enough there, or do you want to have us have some actual vote?
That's a great question. Do I have enough there? I feel like
Sir,
the challenge that I'm.
Sorry to interrupt. The gentleman that dialed in on the phone just a moment ago, could you please mute yourself on your phone? Thank you.
Yeah. I think at this point, given it's a commission, we could uninvite the Parks and Rec Commission. I would feel I was just trying not to uninvite anybody, but if there's someone that you uninvite, a city organization like that, we could do that. I don't, Chair Keller, if you wanted to put it to a vote, we're happy to work with the direction of the commission at this point. We could work with the list that we have, or we could add.
My own perception is that, it'd be awkward and it seems almost rude to tell someone, please come and give us your opinion, then say, well, we actually don't want it. It's a commissioner, but it's like all of us commissioners, we're all citizens of this community. And it's, yes, they don't have the actual numbers, but it's someone that has some interest in parks and recreation and therefore would provide at least that perspective. So I think, in my opinion, we should just go forward with the group as we have it and not try to make changes at this point. It's one more voice. We take it. It's an opinion. It's not going to be, hopefully it's not going to change drastically what we have. I doubt it. And so I think we just keep forward unless Commissioner Davis, seems everybody else is fine. But I think if Commissioner Davis is, we can move forward.
I'd just like to add, so we are having our first meeting, and, if not for COVID-19, we would have had this in a much more eloquent pattern in which we came to the commission a month ago and then ultimately to council. So I do apologize for this being out of order to that extent. It looks like Commissioner Davis would like to opine.
Yes. Commissioner Davis.
While he's doing that, I think he's calling in. while he's doing that, I just wanted to lay out the plan for this evening, our first workshop. What we're planning to do is to do a presentation by WSC and staff. That presentation, not only the PowerPoint, but the presentation itself will be recorded and made publicly available. So everybody in the community will be able to follow along with the information that's being presented to the stakeholders. The actual discussion with the stakeholders, we are going to take meticulous notes and summarize the input that we get, and those notes that we will certainly seek as somewhat of meeting minutes from the group, but those notes will also be publicly available. We hope that also works for the commission as well, as far as a transparency and a reporting out on the progress in those meetings.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Yes, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I missed a little bit of that trying to get back on the phone and get this to work. I had to turn off the computer audio. That's why I think you're getting all the feedback. I don't have a strong feeling, and again, I agree with Chairman Keller that disinviting somebody basically would not exactly be the cool thing to do. I would actually support adding the Planning Commission because I think that their input, again, yes, they are a community member, but they also have an informed idea as to community's feelings on housing and the issues, which I believe, again, are a big demand for water. So I'd like you to consider. I'd like the commission to consider asking the Planning Commission be added.
Okay. Yeah. As I said when I first started, I think it's a good idea to have a planning commission. I think it's it's what's one more. So it makes the group 27 instead of 26. It's just a little bit of a change. I'm fine going forward with that if everybody else seems to, or at least we have a consensus on that.
Chair Keller, staff would be happy to accommodate that. Would you like to put that to a vote? And if we've got a majority vote on that, we'd be happy to invite them.
Okay. Well, thank you. Can we have a motion?
I moved that we add the Planning Commission.
Any
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Can we have the roll call?
Okay, one moment, Davis and Young seconds. Okay. Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kilborn,
Yes.
and Chair Keller.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much. So now we have time for public comment. So it's public comment specifically on this item. So if anyone in the public would like to provide any comment, please do so at this moment. Again, just to remind you, if you do have comments, keep them to 2 minutes. We'd like to be able to provide opportunity for anyone to talk, so just do it for 2 minutes. Commission Secretary, do we have anyone with comments at this point?
Chair Keller, we have one person, Leslie Wiscombe. I will unmute you now. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Water Commission. Thank you very much for letting me participate. I appreciate you adding a planning commissioner. It's not only the housing, but we've just been through a major process for our sea level rise adaptation plan. And I think that's going to be essential too when you work on this enhanced urban water management plan. So that's my comment. And I appreciate staff report on this and the presentation. I thought it was very thorough. And I'd also like to add, which I didn't have time to comment on before, and I know this is not on the agenda now, it's passed, but I truly appreciate the public service announcements that are going out that Mr. Hagmark mentioned earlier to the public and to our community. I think they are going to be essential, particularly the message about our water supply is safe and reliable. So thank you very much, and thank you for the work you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that comment. Very much appreciated. Any other public comments?
Chair Keller, no other public comment at this time.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for that input. So any further input from the commissioners? Any other questions? Okay, if not, this concludes this item. And so we're now going to move on to...
Excuse,
Sorry.
one question. Did we vote on the motion?
Yes, we did. We
Okay,
did the roll
sorry.
call.
I just
Okay.
wanted to say thank you. I think I appreciate the very clear communication on this, and we are happy to bring in the Planning Commission. So thank you for the dialogue and the conversation and the direction.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to our next administrative item, item 7C. This is also a very relevant item at this point. It's the preliminary estimates, and I think the emphasis is on preliminary estimates of COVID-19 financial impacts to water and wastewater funds. And so I'd like to invite Mr. Hamilton to give us his perspective on these important issues.
Great. Thank you, Chair Keller, Commissioners. As you said, here to present preliminary financial impacts to the water and wastewater funds from the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we're going to be looking today for input from the Commission, particularly on some rate planning scenarios that we've been preparing. As you said, Chair Keller, we're somewhat in the eye of the storm here in terms of doing financial analysis. So these are preliminary, and we will keep you updated as we get more information. Next slide, please. So today we'll look at what was the world like in December and January when we were preparing our budgets and our rate consultant was moving forward with rates for water, and what were we planning for wastewater, and how everything was going just before the COVID impacts hit. We'll talk briefly about what are the immediate impacts to our revenues from COVID, and largely, of course, this is going to be from the commercial and industrial water demand sector, but there are some other smaller hits to the funds that we'll take as well. We have some rate planning scenarios that we want to go through. We prepared several, and we'll step through them as quickly as possible, but we do want to make sure that you're fully informed on how we see changes to our rates could impact our capital programs, our reserve levels, and our future rate increases potentially. We'll talk about a water bill assistance program. Our rate consultant initially was going to start this effort at the tail end of rates in September of this year. We've expedited that work effort to start now, and so we'll talk a little bit about what we've asked them to do and what they will be preparing. And then we'll go into the next steps about Finance Committee and City Council. Next slide, please. So where were we in December and January? Well, water was on a time schedule to adopt rates in September 2020. If you recall, we pushed it back. Typically, we're trying to get rates in place by July 1 of every year to coincide with the fiscal year. However, the water supply agreement with Montecito, which is not yet executed, would have a huge impact potentially on our rates. And so we wanted to hold off for that. In addition, conservation had been pretty steady, and we wanted to give a little more time to water demand analysis to see if there was any rebound in demand, which also potentially has a large impact on rates. So we had pushed back our intended adoption to September of this year. So what were we looking at? It was about 5 to 7% rate increases. That was the consultant recommendation. HDR Engineering is our consultant. They've settled more recently, and we haven't had a chance to come back to commission, but it was looking to be about 6% for 3 years. We had discussed we're seeing about 3.5% annual increase in inflationary costs. So just the cost of doing business every year, we see cost increases. There were some other more specific impacts from the Community Choice Energy initiative from the city, which was going to raise the electric bills for the water and wastewater funds. Also, another portion of that is the Strategic Energy Plan, which allocates costs based on energy usage. The water and wastewater systems are high energy users within the city organization, and we would be collecting a good amount of those costs as well. Also, we had some new capital investment needs, so we needed to step up our level of capital investment. Water main replacement, we had moved from 1% to 2% annual replacement rate recently, and we wanted to keep that going. And in addition, we had some recommended staffing changes to meet changing business practices, namely to meet the change in the advanced metering infrastructure implementation. Also, we were going to use reserves in the water fund, and that was going to help us buffer some of the rate increase, or it would lower what would otherwise be the rate increase. Now for wastewater, wastewater already has rates adopted. We adopted them last year in June. It was a 3-year rate schedule, and it was 3 years of 5%. The next rates would go into effect July 1 of this year, July 1, 2020. As we go through the rate planning scenarios, we may have to take council action to lower those rates if they so chose, but we wouldn't have to publicly notice again because the rates that are noticed would be higher than what would be adopted. Now, wastewater is in a slightly different position. It does not have excess reserves. We have actually dipped into our capital project reserves to fund the Ellistair Electrical Renewal Project. The purpose of that was to get the project far enough along that we would be competitive for a low interest loan from the State Revolving Fund program. In addition, wastewater also has recommended staffing changes to meet the enhanced demands from the public for the SLIP program. Next slide. So looking at the immediate impacts from the COVID pandemic, the largest impact for both the water and wastewater fund is going to come from the commercial industrial customer class. As you can imagine, every day in Santa Barbara in normal times, there is a huge imported water demand that comes in the form of tourists and commuters. And that has essentially been wiped out. So our early indications of the reductions in commercial water demand is around 70 to 90%. We have taken a look at the wastewater flows into the wastewater treatment plant, and that somewhat correlates to about 70% reduced demand in water. I should say, you would imagine some of this water demand just transfers back to households. So you're using restroom facilities at your office, well, now you're using restroom facilities at your house. And so we have seen in a very small sample size, about a 5% increase in single family residential water use. So we'll continue to monitor that, but using our AMI data from the pilot project, we took a small sample and it looks like there's a small bump in single family residential usage. Now, water and wastewater are slightly different in their rate structures. So water collects about 70% of their revenue from volumetric rates. So it has a little more exposure to changes in water demand. And wastewater collects about 50-50 in terms of fixed charges and volumetric charges. How is that working out? Well, water is looking like it will lose about $500,000 per month based on a 90% reduction in commercial water use. That right now, we're expecting to continue through June. So that would be $1.5 million through the end of the fiscal year that water will lose in revenue. Looking at wastewater, because it's less impacted by these volumetric shifts, we're looking at about $200,000 per month through the end of the fiscal year. So $600,000 total through April, May, and June. However, I think everyone would acknowledge, even when the governor lifts the stay-at-home order, that water won't rebound immediately. The economy, of course, will come back gradually, as will businesses, as will business demand and tourist demand, as well as when commuters start returning to the city to work in offices and not from home. So really, I think we would expect a very gradual 3-year recovery in revenues. And we built that into the next scenarios that I'm going to walk you through. There are a few other less impactful, much smaller hits to these funds. So these are capacity charges. This is highly correlated with development. We would imagine at some point there will be a downturn or a lag in development potentially if the economy, if it reaches that far into the economy. And service connections, as well as high strength surcharges, that's particular to the wastewater fund. But potentially from events not occurring as planned, there would be less portable restroom waste being discharged at the Marburg facility. So there'd be less high strength surcharges received. Okay, next slide, please. And if you just tap for Kel, that would be great. So I'm gonna present to you 2 different tables here, one for water, one for wastewater, but they have the same setup. Along the top, we have named several different financial scenarios, somewhat tied to our rate increases. And if you tap again, Raquel, on the left-hand side, we have the outcomes or the the different components of each of these scenarios. So the adoption timeline, we're very specifically honing in on FY21 rate increases. And so in anticipation of council asking us to look at ways that we can provide relief to the community, we're focusing on FY21. We should say the rates are somewhat compounding. So if you little changes now in rates have a very big impact over a 10-year planning period, and you'll see that in these different scenarios. And then we'll walk through each of these. Next slide, please. So the pre-COVID scenario is the December-January timeline, like I explained. For water, we're adopting in September. We're doing 6% rate increases because that's what the consultant has recommended. The monthly bill increase is about $7.50 for a single-family customer who's using 10 HCF per month. We're not doing any reductions in our capital program. We're funding a 2% water main replacement program. We're funding AMI. We're going forward with all the critical investments that we need. And our reserve levels are pretty healthy. They're about 120% of policy. And our long-term outlook is maybe about 3% rate increases after we get through these 6%. Now, next slide, please. Now, what are these immediate impacts to COVID? And that's what this case looks at here. Well, if we continue to do rate increases as planned, adopt in September, we wouldn't have to reduce capital program, but because of the loss of revenue from the commercial sector, we would essentially use the large majority of our excess reserves. So we draw down on our reserves immediately, about $5 to $7 million over the course of a few years. And it's very likely that we'd have to do 4% increases in out years to make up for that lost revenue as well. Now let's go to the 3% increase scenario. Thank you, Raquel. This shows what happens if in 21 we go to 3% rate increases, not 6, and we immediately bounce back though. We immediately go back to 6 in 22 and 6 in 23, just as the consultant has recommended. What happens? Well, of course, your monthly bill decreases a little bit. However, in order to balance reserves, we have to cut $5 million in funding next year to the water main program. We draw down our reserves to council policy level, which is still okay. And we again take another bump in the long-term outlook to rates. So now at this point, we go to 3% now, but we're looking at 5% rate increases in about the 4 to 10-year time frame. I did want to open it up a second to Mr. Hagmark if he wanted to talk about the prioritization of funding cuts in FY21.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Yeah, not something I typically would recommend. I typically think we should take care of the infrastructure that we have before adding new infrastructure. But as you know, we've been talking about the advanced metering infrastructure project for a long time, and it got put on hold with the drought. And right now we have a lot of momentum going. We've been moving forward with that. We've got a staffing plan. We've got consultant support lined up. We've just recently been notified that we got $1.5 million grant for AMI. And when I look ahead at our customers and the challenges they're going to have, particularly going into a recession, having control over their water usage, being able to actively manage that and have alerts that will let them know if they are have a leak or their water usage is higher than maybe they can afford. Having those early warnings, I think, would ultimately help us to build trust with our community as we work through a recession. And so for that reason, I am recommending that we continue in all of these options to push forward with AMI and to look at taking a temporary break from the full magnitude of the water main program. It's not ideal, but at the end of the day, we have to make cuts somewhere. And during the drought, we made significant cuts in our workload, and we shifted a lot of our construction activity to contractors. And so our staff as a whole is a really lean staff. We do not have an overburden of staffing here that somehow we could reduce. And so, we've contracted out paving. We've contracted out a lot of water main emergency repair work, depending on the magnitude of that, and even some water service work. So we've got our program down to being pretty lean as far as what we can shed. And so it really leads us back to the water main program. And I'm not excited to, or wouldn't be excited to do that, but ultimately we wanted to provide the public, the Water Commission and Council with some options. And this is kind of what we're looking for, the feedback. And if we were to take a lesser rate increase, that's what we would target first. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Mr. Hamilton.
Can I just a second, Mr. Hagemark? There's been some discussion at the federal level in the Senate and our in the House to think about ways to fund, provide some funding for utilities. Have you heard of anything like that at this point in terms of there may be some support for projects to be able to sort of restart the economy that may target water utilities? I understand that there's been some discussions. I don't know how far they've gone.
Yeah, I don't think it's gone too far right now, and I don't blame them. They're trying to make sure that people have sufficient money to put food on the table, but I haven't heard anything meaningful related to local governments and utilities. I hope. I mean, if you look back at the Great Recession, that was probably one of the most powerful ways of getting people back to work, was funding these needed infrastructure projects. So we will be ready. We will be ready to move with that if that's where the states and feds go. But given the magnitude of this pandemic and the impacts, financial impacts, I think they've got a lot of other issues they need to tackle first. So this is our preliminary approach to it, and where we would first take. I should say that $5 million. Right now, we're spending about $8.5 million a year on water main replacement. Mm-hmm. So a $5 million reduction takes us back to where we were a few years ago when we were doing 1%. And we showed that wasn't going to be sustainable. But I think at this point, we're all having to make some tough decisions, and I think what this is going to likely do is just shift more of our costs to emergency response. But I think that's really the most, at this point, that's kind of our best option. And then hopefully, like you mentioned, maybe some federal and state money comes through that would help us get that reinvestment and infrastructure back up again.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Hamilton. So this particular scenario we're looking at here still does not include the water supply agreement. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair Keller.
Okay, thank you. So please go ahead.
Okay, next slide, please. So as we move past the 3% rate increase, we kind of get into the worst of all scenarios here, which is it does provide relief to the community in terms of rates. It also has pretty significant impacts downstream when you don't do a rate increase for a year. So for instance, this is not doing a rate increase for FY21. What happens to our capital program? If you look down there for FY21, 22, and 23, we have to cut the water main program by $5 million each year. So that's about a $15 million cut. We use all of our reserves and then some. So we dip slightly below our policy reserve levels, about 95%. And we hold that rate increase in the long-term outlook at about 5%. So if we go to the next slide, Chair Keller, this is the contrast. So let's say we do no rate increase in FY21, but the water supply agreement with Montecito goes into effect. So we start collecting roughly 3.5 to somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 million annually from selling water to Montecito Water District. Well, we immediately get to scale back the cuts from the capital program. So instead of doing 3 years of cuts, we're doing 1 year of $5 million reduction. We slightly raise our council policy levels. So now we're at council policy with the water supply agreement. And also it has a pretty significant long-term impact of rate increases. So instead of doing 5% rate increases, we're doing somewhere in the neighborhood of 3, potentially 4% rate increases. So it would be very beneficial. And of course, in all of the scenarios, when you trigger or turn on the water supply agreement, they have a better outlook.
So to add to Mr. Hamilton's comments there, I just wanted to state that the challenge that you see with the water sales agreement is once it is executed, there is infrastructure that needs to be put in and before we can start delivery of water to the district. And so there's kind of that lag. So in the immediate, there's not an immediate influx of money until we can start making delivery of that water. And so that's why you see we still have that FY21 impact. So happy to be, and this is there another water slide on this, or is next goes into wastewater, right?
Commissioner Davis
Hagman.
has a question.
Yeah.
A question on the policy reserves. What is our policy position on dipping into reserves? And if this kind of emergency is not the time to essentially look at dipping into policy reserves?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Chair Keller, Commissioner Davis. The policy is typically that if you're going to dip into reserves, that they'd like you to keep it to no more than 2 years below council policy. And at the time you dip below, you have to provide a plan on how to get out. So you can look at these scenarios and say, certainly we can dip into reserves further. The long-term outlook, so this last line on the slide, you just start increasing that essentially to get yourself out. So how quickly do you want to fall into reserves, and then how gradually do you want to build yourself out? And that's just a triggering of rate increases in the long-term outlook and cutting capital.
Right. Mr. Hagman, what's I know you've continued conversations with Montecito on the water supply agreement. What's your perspective at this point? I think it's still very favorable, no? But please tell us.
It is. I would be completely honest with you on this one. Every indication from the Montecito staff and their board has been positive. They continue to pursue their rate increase. I just saw on a recent agenda they're looking to temporarily do some exchanges with their state waters to free up cash as well. Mm-hmm. And so they seem to be pretty focused on getting this agreement, and I think it's I think where we've gotten with it is it's fair and reasonable to both agencies. So there's still a lot to work out, and it's not 100% in any way, but we're still shooting for a June-July timeline to bring that forward for more public discussion on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Sneddon? Hi. Welcome.
Hello. I just had a question about phasing in increases. So instead of going an entire year without or entire year at 3%, what that would do if we said 6 months or phasing it in a later time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. You want to go for it, Mr. Hamilton?
Chair Keller, council members Sneddon. Essentially, the first three scenarios here have a September 20 adoption. So there's a period of the year through September and likely into October where there's no rate increase, and then we step up to the 6%, or in the case 3%. We can absolutely phase them in. Those are already built in with the adoption timeline of September 2020. If we're talking about phasing in rate increases over multiple years, we would imagine these impacts would get more drastic to the capital program, and the long-term outlook for rates would get higher, or we'd have to dip into reserves and potentially stay under council policy for 2 to 4 years potentially.
Thank you.
Commissioner Young?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Question about the water main funding situation. So I don't understand what the downside is. If we have a reduction in funding, how will that negatively affect water main replacement? And what does that expose us to?
Chair Keller, Commissioner Young, thank you. We had been battling, prior to you coming on the commission, really battling main breaks. We have had over 100 main breaks a year, and each one of those represents damage and outages in the system as a result. And so we were trying to get ahead of that because we have an aging population of water mains that are reaching the end of their useful life. A lot of and we can go into more detail, but a lot of pipe that was put in the 1950s, World War II, they kind of were compromised on a lot of the materials that were used in those pipes, and so they're not as thick as you might expect a pipe from maybe the 20s. And so we're not getting the service life that we had hoped. I mean, they're still getting roughly 80 years, but they're coming to the end of that useful life, and we wanted to get ahead of that because as those start to go, we're spending more money now and resources on going out, digging up and fixing a section of pipe, and it's not a productive way to run an operating system ultimately. And so the commission and council had weighed in on that, and we made the big decision to go from replacing 1% of the water system to 2%. And we're really making, I mean, water main breaks have actually come down quite a bit. We're making some headway at taking and addressing some of those streets where we've had 3, 4, 5 main breaks history on that street, and really starting to get those replaced. And so can we take a short break? Yes, but I don't want to ease people in the fact that we think we can take a long break from this, because quickly those breaks are going to sneak back up on us again, and we're going to be spending millions of dollars a year just chasing breaks and not really addressing the root problem.
Okay, so I mean that helps. So the plan would be to resume back to the normal rate of water main replacement once everything kind of normalizes out.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have another question, just a quick question. What's the timing in terms of when do we need to make a decision to go forward with the adoption of the increase in September 2020 or not, and then move it forward to sometime in the future? When do you have to have our recommendation? Would it have to be today, or what's the time frame?
Chair Keller, it would not have to be today. We're just providing our preliminary estimates. There's a 45-day noticing period for changing rates, and so at least 2 to 3 months beforehand, we try to get the rate memorandum out so the public can see what the basis is of the rate changes before that, and then notice the rates publicly. So we do have some time. If we were to do no rate increase in fiscal year 21, we would have to make a decision on that fairly quickly, because we'll have to go to council and have them adopt a new rate schedule that reduces the 21 rates.
Right, thank you. Please go ahead.
I think just to wrap up for the commission, if we could go back one slide, Raquel, that you see the outlook here. If we did go to 3%, as council members said and had asked, there would be no rate increase through September, October, then it would step up to 3% at that time. So it would be somewhat of a phased in approach to rates in FY21. And in addition, if the water supply agreement did go forward, then we would be able to reduce our long-term outlook for rates and potentially also the FY21 reduction to main funding. I think that's a good middle ground scenario to consider. Going to 0% has pretty significant impacts over immediately and over the long term because of how rates compound. So we'll move to wastewater. Thank you. So this table has the same setup as the last, and we're looking at exactly the same type of components in terms of the adoption timeline and through down to the long-term outlook for wastewater. As we explained, wastewater is in a different position. They have a pretty significant use of reserves already. So in our pre-COVID planning scenario, we're doing 5% rate increases in 21. That equates to about $2.70 in the monthly bill increase for single family residential users. Our capital program is continuing as we had planned with the 5% increases. However, our reserve levels are already pretty low. So they're at 60% of policy. And as I explained, the purpose of that is to get the electrical project at El Estero to final design, which makes us competitive for a low interest SRF loan. Once we secure that loan, we will be reimbursed for expenditures up to that point, but we have to spend money to get money in this case. And the long-term outlook for rates in our pre-COVID plan was 5%. So it was about 10 years of 5% increases to keep pace with the capital investments needed. Now, if we move to the COVID impacts, this is immediate impacts from the revenue loss from our commercial customers. And if you go down, what's happening? Well, because of this, and we've already used so much of our capital reserve that we would, at this point, have to defer the Braemar lift station or the rehabilitation of the Braemar lift station. By doing that, we would actually improve our reserve level position slightly, which going into this type of disaster is probably the prudent thing to do, is to have more cash on hand than less. And our long-term outlook for rates bumps up slightly to probably about 5.5% to make up for the losses we're experiencing now in commercial rate revenue. Like I did previously, I just want to open this up to Ms. Flessy, the wastewater manager, and I believe she wanted to talk briefly, or Mr. Hagmark, about the importance of the Braemar lift station project.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. The Braemar lift station is an essential piece of work that is down by the beach area, and it serves a big community, and that has been on our capital improvement list for probably about 10 years. So it really puts us at a risk to delay that project any further than 2 or 3 years. With this COVID impacts, we are going to have to defer the Braemar lift station, but our plan is to continue with the design. The design is scheduled to be complete in May, and this was originally scheduled to go out to bid this summer. That we no longer have the money to do that, but we were planning on rolling this into either an SRF loan at the end of the year, or have it shovel ready for any kind of stimulus package that may come available in the next few months from the federal government. I believe that this project would meet all of the regulatory needs that may come from any kind of stimulus package. It is shovel ready. It is directly impacted by this COVID-19, and it is a high risk item. So we do believe that it is a great project that would meet any demands probably from any kind of stimulus package. So deferring this Braemar lift station, I talked to staff and we could probably defer it, but probably no more than 2 years.
Ms. Flessy, can you expand on how much of the city's wastewater flows go through that lift station?
Sure. So the lift station, quite a bit of the city's flows go through. I believe it's over 60% of our wastewater goes through that lift station. It's one of the last lift stations before it goes into El Estero, goes through the Cabrillo area, and then goes into El Estero, our treatment plant.
Thank you, Ms. Flessy. So going on to the 3% rate increase for the wastewater program, because the rates are already adopted, we would need a council action in June. We wouldn't have to publicly notice, so we could do that pretty quickly because the rates that are adopted are higher than what we would actually adopt in June. The monthly bill impact is about $1.63 if you only do a 3% rate increase. We're deferring Braemar in the capital program, and in addition, we're cutting $500,000 out of the sanitary sewer overflow compliance light item, which has impacts of its own. I will open up it again, Ms. Flessy, if you want to make a comment about that. Our council policy levels stay roughly around 70%. And then from going to 3%, our long-term outlook essentially steps up again. So now we're doing 6% rate increases in the future to make up and balance revenues from doing 3% now.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. So the SSO funding, that is our sanitary sewer overflow fund. And that is basically what we use to rehab and clean all of our collection system. In the next presentation, we will show you what we've been doing with that, that money and that whole collection system program. That program is very vital in reducing a lot of our sanitary sewer overflows. We've been extremely successful for the past 10 years in trying to reduce those sanitary sewer overflows, and we have been successful the past 2 years in getting our program just right. If we do take this rate increase hit, we will be putting that program into jeopardy, and adverse impacts of sanitary sewer flows may occur due to that, in both this 3% rate increase and no rate increase.
Thank you. And finally, our last scenario, just like in water, is what happens if we don't do any rate increase in FY21. And like we'd also have to take action in June with council to adjust the fee resolution. The deferral Braemar, of course, is still continuing. And now we're looking at about $1.5 million reduction in funding to the SSO line item. We're still maintaining our council policy reserves at about 70%. And in the future, we're doing 6% rate increases. And even that, from looking at the modeling, if we have any variance in our revenues, we're likely even making deeper cuts to the capital program from doing 0% now. So I think on this slide, we're happy to take any questions, but to leave you with this, that the wastewater fund is in a much tighter position because it's already using reserves. And so to go to 0% for the wastewater fund is pretty detrimental and keeps us under council policy for longer than I believe we would like to be. Go to the next slide. Okay, so turning to billing assistance, what we're doing now, Joshua explained a lot of this, I think, in his first presentation, is that we have tools in place to assist our customers. Please give us a call, and if you're gonna have trouble paying your bill or you think you may, we can work out payment plans with our customers if you just call our billing office. There is one thing that some customers may not know they're eligible before. There's the utility users tax, which is placed on all utility water, wastewater, solid waste utility bills. So it's a 6% tax. If you are below a certain income level based on your IRS tax data, you can waive that tax for customers. The issue with the UUT tax exemption, of course, is that it's based on your prior year's tax filing. So for instance, if you were fully employed through all of 2019, just recently because of the COVID pandemic, you've lost your job or you're unemployed, that's not going to be reflected in your 2019 tax return, so you may not be eligible. And I say that because in looking at the next bullet point, the bill assistance program, it's something we struggle with on how we could expedite assistance for our customers. So in addition to doing reduced rate increases, we've asked our consultant HDR to provide a report on rate assistance programs in the state. So this effort was supposed to take place in the later part of this year and early next year. And we've asked them to expedite the effort to look at this and see what we could do very quickly to help our customers. So one thing we may be able to do here is implement a program that immediately enrolls a certain discount basis on your water bill for customers that are in the user's utility waiver program. Like I mentioned, this was originally planned for the next rate study cycle, so we'd be expediting this pretty significantly. And some of the things we're looking at and are concerned for us is just the administrative factors. So funding and the program reach. So how much funding and how many people can we reach with that? Customer eligibility is also a concern. Is if you're not using tax data, then what kind of parameters and discretion are you exercising to assist customers? And that can be administratively burdensome to implement. Like I mentioned, workload for staff, and then the discount structure. What would be most beneficial to customers and how would we go about actually providing water bill assistance. Mr. Hagmark?
I just wanted to add to this. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I just wanted to add that we certainly aren't going to be the only utility struggling with this. I'm also actively watching the state and federal response to see if there's going to be any assistance provided in this area, because you have these core utilities that are providing services, and then you all of a sudden have customers unable to pay. You can quickly get into a spiraling effect where you can find your utilities unable to maintain basic resources. So, unfortunately, during the last recession, you saw that in Detroit. They had a huge unemployment during the last recession. The utility at that time was very sympathetic to its customers, and we're letting customers pass or not pay their utilities, and it quickly spiraled out of control and put the Detroit in a bankruptcy situation. And so I'm not saying that we're going that direction. Bringing this up, just wanting to say that it is a very serious issue we're following. We certainly want to be sympathetic and helpful with our customers, but also recognize that we aren't the only utility that is going to be struggling with this issue. But we hope to take advantage of our contract with HDR to develop some options that the Water Commission might want to consider. But there's obviously a lot of issues to unwrap in that, and so where the funding would come from and how that program might be administered. I don't see this being an immediate solution. And I keep going back to the first one. If folks are struggling with their utility bill, they should call us. We have worked out in the past different types of payment programs with our customers, depending on their situation. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we could just progress to the last slide. So our next steps is to take the input from Water Commission. We'll be going to Finance Committee on April 28th. We'll be going with solid waste, wastewater, and water to give an update on rates and get policy input. On May 27th, we have our departmental budget presentation for Public Works, and we'll be looking for direction from City Council at that time on water and wastewater rates. And then finally, in June, if we have to make any adjustments to already adopted rates, we would be making those with the regularly planned budget adoption. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamilton. That presentation, I think it's fairly clear. We have tough decisions ahead. I want to ask commissioners, any questions or comments? So just a quick, I think more clarification. You mentioned this water rate. In fact, the 5% has already been approved. It's gone through the city. So there, if we recommend to bring it down % or to something else, that would be something that just needs to have a decision, but sorry, it's sort of within the notification range. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chair Carroll, that is correct. We would not have to notice again to the public. It'd be an administrative change.
Right. We go below. Yeah. Okay. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Yeah, I was just gonna throw in my 2 cents. The postponement of the upgrades to the Braemar lift station, that kind of concerns me. That's a critical facility, I think, and any kind of failure at that location would be pretty catastrophic based on its location to the Arroyo Creek and that neighborhood down there. So I know it's a tough decision to make on timing when that happens, but I do recommend that moves forward as quickly as it possibly can, depending on how this all plays out.
It would seem to me that if we decide to postpone the water rate increase, or at least not make it as large, then the wastewater rate, the $2.70 some cents, it's not a very large increase in terms of the overall water bill. So that's something to keep in mind, that it would be a very small increase that most consumers would be on their overall city utilities bill, right? Do we know if there are any increases on trash and items in that bill?
Chair Keller, I believe solid waste is proposing increases. They've had some pretty significant ones in recent history due to the Tehigua's project. I don't know the exact percentage, but I believe it's about 5.
Okay.
And I had a question also about the projections on the income, the revenue income. Does that take into account maybe some people being able to pay their bills? Is there a loss kind of calculated in there, or did you project the income and the rates based on basically everyone paying their bills?
Yeah, Chair Keller, Commissioner Kilborn, there is no factor right now for widespread non-payment. We do have a regular rate of default or non-payment bad debt expense essentially that gets posted, but nothing beyond that at this point. It's something that certainly is out there and has a potential to continue to further erode what I've already presented to you. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're a little bit in the eye of the storm, and we're just trying to do our best possible to put bounds on the exposure, and then fine tune it in the next couple months.
And I think the other challenge to that is we've suspended water shutoffs, rightfully so, during this pandemic. But I think that usually was our tool for getting folks to prioritize payment of their utility bill.
Okay. Can I go back to the water supply agreement and ask, so I know it's looking good, but what's the time frame in terms of when we think that may be finalized? I think that's an important decision in terms of how we go for the water rates themselves. And if it looks like that could be adopted, the agreement would be signed soon, then we may be able to make different decisions on the rates, but we sort of have to play it out. So just to get a sense of the timing.
Yeah, Chair Keller, commissioners. Last time I spoke with the general manager of Montecito Water District, they were still shooting for June. I don't know how the recent COVID impacts have changed their schedule, but they were looking to adopt in June. And the way that they were structuring it, they were wanting to adopt rates and entertain this agreement at basically the same time. So their rate hearing is what they were kind of targeting as their opportunity also to vote on the participation in this water supply agreement. So I can continue to try and keep you all updated, but June was the last update I got from them.
Okay, well, thank you. And
we do have, just real quick, we do have, we are still making good progress on the agreement. It's been going back and forth. Our city attorney, Dan Henske, who's on the line and listening, but he's been going back and forth with Montecito's attorney as well. And so they've made, I think, are making really good progress on that. And I haven't seen any fatal issues identified in their work on that agreement.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners? Any questions from the public? Oh, yes, sorry, Kristen, Commissioner Councilman.
Okay. Thank you. It's whatever. I guess I just have questions on how many actual dollars on someone's bill this will be. I mean, water and wastewater, these are things that actually cost real money to supply and to maintain. And I'm wondering how big of an impact on people's bills it actually is. And back to Mr. Hamilton, what you were saying about the added staffing, or how you would make delineations on who could have, I don't know, considerations in their rates for lower income or higher impacted, but I'm just wondering if there are ways other than decreasing the water rates for everyone. Some people just aren't hit as hard, and some people are hit extra hard. And you touched on it about the difficulty in deciding what thresholds and how to manage that, but maybe a little bit more on that, on might it be worthwhile to pursue that more? I mean, for some people, it's not as big of an impact at all, and that we have to supply the actual service as a city. So just if you would comment on that a little bit more.
Sure, Chair Keller, council members, Sneddon. For the first question, if you can see this slide clearly, in about the middle row, it says monthly bill increase, single family residential customers. And so for water, that would be the monthly impact from doing 6%, or in the middle, 3%. So about $7.50 if we went ahead as planned, $3.73 if we only did a 3% rate increase. So if we did a 5% for wastewater and 3% for water, it'd be about $6 a month increase on their bill for water and wastewater. So that's pretty minimal for some people, and it may be more substantial for others. In terms of the billing assistance program, what I was trying to get at is, if we simply use tax data, many people who are not doing well right now would look like they were doing well according to their tax data for 2019. They were fully employed. They made much more than the federal income poverty limits or standards, but just in the last month. So how do we accommodate those people? How do we get our reach in the billing assistance program wider? Well, we have to be more discretionary, and being discretionary is going to take some administrative work. So is that providing us with an unemployment claim as a criteria, and then we'll provide assistance for 6 or 12 months? Is it 150, 200, 300% of federal income poverty standards, which even at that point is pretty minimal. And we could help those people with the by tagging along to the UUT program right now. But I think that's what we're concerned about, is there's more people than just those that are low income that need assistance right now. How many people is that, and how do we administer that effectively, and how do we do that quickly without letting it get a little, without it overwhelming us?
And then how does it affect commercial businesses? So this is individuals and their bill. What does this do when restaurants are trying to reopen, or that impact to their rates?
That's a great question, and that's something I don't think we know right now. We have a better idea of how we could help residential customers quickly, so we can expedite a program. How we would help commercial establishments is probably has more nuance to it than even the residential customers. Well, hopefully there will be some federal and state assistance for these businesses, but But we will ask the consultant, I think this is a good point, to look at, are there rate assistance programs for commercial establishments?
I just, as an overarching, and I'm looking forward to hearing the recommendations from the Water Commission, and we'll wait until it comes to council. But just when we look at structure before COVID versus these next 3 years coming out of it, how we break our tiers, which groups we're looking at, it seems to be very different now. I mean, when you'll have some businesses in recovery, some people in recovery versus those who were not impacted as much. Just looking at that maybe as it moves forward would be my final comment. And thank you, really excellent presentation. I would not recommend 0 increases or taking our reserves very far down. This is, as Commissioner Davis maybe mentioned, or questioned, maybe this is what reserves are for, but the wastewater seems a little bit lower than comfortable. And that would be my comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Davis, you have a question or comment? Commissioner Davis, you're still off, you're mute. We can't hear you. Sorry, we're still not hearing you.
So you're muted on your phone.
Yeah,
There you go.
off. Okay.
So going to Councilmember Snedden's comment about the impact upon the household, I'm going to channel our previous colleague and now Councilmember Jordan. It's not the individual. When you look at water and it's like $3, $7, it's the combination of water, wastewater, and trash. And when you put those together, I would hope that when council, this comes up to the finance committee and on the council, that you're looking at the overall impact upon the household of the utility costs. Michael always brought these up at our meetings, and he's not here anymore, so I'll carry that forward for him. I also agree with Commissioner Kilborn that we don't want to defer the Braemar rate station or lift station. I also agree with that particular comment. And then my last question is just simply, are you looking for comments from us, or are you looking for some consensus from the commission itself? Thanks.
Thank you.
Chair Keller, Commissioner Davis, and Commissioners, I think we're looking for just input and comment at this point. I'd let Mr. Hagmark jump on if he wants. If he's looking for a recommendation, but I think input is good.
Before that comment, I just wanted to give perhaps follow up a little on what Councilmember Sneddon had mentioned. And it seems to me that the point is well that many in our community are, in a position where they afford, a rate increase of, if we look at the two rates, it'd be something on the order of $10 if we do the full piece between from there. So a significant number of people could do the rate increase as we had originally planned, but others need help, and others need a lot of help. And so one option would be to think of having the rate increase as planned, but then reserve a certain percentage of the income that is generated by that increase, 20 or 30%, to help out those people that cannot afford the rate increase, even afford to pay their utility for a while. And so that's something that, for example, the university has been doing more and more where, there's a fraction of the population basically is the one that is paying the full cost. And then we're helping out those that can't make it with something like that. It may be a way to fund the distance program and to think about how do we target people, as you were pointing out, Mr. Hamilton, people who have recently become unemployed, and maybe that would be the criterion for saying you need help. If you're unemployed, can't pay your bill or can't pay the full bill, maybe there's a way for you to defer it or even to have a full, you won't be paying it. Anyway, so I think we could think a little bit broader as to how do we implement this. I think there are some important infrastructure needs that we need to consider. As was pointed out, the Braemar lift facility is really important. It's something that we really shouldn't be deferring too much, and to defer it even 1 year could put us in a position where we may have to spend a lot more money to deal with an emergency. Same thing happens with the water mains where, it seems like, we could defer it, but if we defer this very important program, we may have a lot more money and with many other consequences, people not having water supplied and all that. So I think those are important things to consider. So I would like to sort of see if we could come up for the next meeting with some plan that helps us to see how we could maybe, with the help of the consultant program that allows us to do as it is or a partial increase and then provide funding for those who can't afford that. Yes, Mr. Hageman.
This is great. This is exactly what we were hoping to get, is just some feedback on just our initial, look at this. We certainly will program to bring something back to you all in May. We are headed to Finance Committee at the end of the month, and I appreciate the Commissioner Davis channeling Councilmember Jordan, because I do think that's helpful to put together what does that full bill look like, because it's not the water bill, it's not the wastewater bill, it is the utility bill, and it includes all three of those critical services that the city provides. And so I think having that comprehensive discussion will be important. And that's the plan right now for Finance Committee. I know Solid Waste is scrambling to see what options they have, but they're kind of tied in with the county and the planned facility that's going in out at Tahiga. So we hear you loud and clear on some of these things. I think it's really challenging, and I think even the position of the commission and the council and communicating that to the public, that why do we need to do this now? And so I looking at those delayed options that maybe we'll just know a little better in October. I don't think the economy is going to be doing any better in October, but And that's some of my fears with putting this off. And then as you see the long-term outlook, if we're going into a recession for the next, couple years, it really gets difficult to try and deal with some of those rate increases out in the future as well. So, we welcome any thoughts, any comments. So we're listening.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I do hope that the economy is doing better in October. I mean, right now we're in neutral, so we really need to start moving forward. Anyway, so thank you very much for that, Mr. Hamilton and Ms. Hagmark. I would like to open up for the public. If there are any comments at this point, any public comments, let us know. Again, please limit them to 2 minutes.
Chair Keller, we have one person that would like to make a comment. Hillary Hauser, I will unmute you and you have 2 minutes. 1 moment.
Welcome, Ms. Hauser.
Ms. Hauser, you are muted. Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
Okay, are we there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And Allison Thompson's on this call too, and she's taking all the notes for me so I can keep track of you guys. But I have one important question. Arturo, who painted the painting behind you, the fishes?
I did with myself and my wife. Thank you.
But I mean, I paint paintings like that, and I'm saying I've got to see that one. So anyway, everybody, I really appreciate your discussion of this. I'm always nervous about taking doing a rate hike that might not be enough for something that's coming in the future, in the near future, and so. I think waiting until this COVID situation is really settled is better than doing, having to look at this again. It's just a general comment, but I get the problem, and the economics and any rate hike at all is tough on the communities. Even $1 more is hard for a lot of people. So I don't know. So if the commission feels that it's imperative to move forward now rather than October, if everybody feels pretty solid about that, that's all I've got to say. It's not really a question. I'm just babbling at you.
Thank you very much for your opinion. We really value that. Thank you for that. I think we're not making a decision at this point. We're just evaluating. I think we're trying to be ahead of the situation by looking at what is the of this terrible situation that we're all in, and how do we sort of protect our ability to safe water and wastewater services to our community. And so we do need to have some funding, but of course we also have to be very conscious about the fact that these are very difficult times. Any other questions or comments from Commissioner? Sorry, is there anybody else that wants to make public comment at this point?
Yes, we have another person, Ms. Leslie Westcomb. I am going to unmute you, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Leslie Wiscombe from the Planning Commission again. I just want to thank staff for the...
Sorry, Leslie Wiscombe, to interrupt you. If you are not speaking, if you can put your microphone on mute, there is some background noise and we can't really hear our speaker. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
No, there's static in the background.
It actually sounds like it's coming from Leslie's line. Yes, when you mute her, it goes away. So Leslie, if you're in a bad cell area, maybe you could go outside so we can hear you. It sounds like it's the connection in your actual phone.
Yeah, I'm on my laptop. Can you hear me now? You've heard me before, so this is...
We can hear you. There's just a ton of static that overrides your voice. So if you'd like to try to get through it, please go ahead.
And maybe speak up.
Okay, I'm going to move my laptop. Can you hear me now? Any better?
Still get static. It's probably the sound card, but yes, just please go ahead and just speak loudly if you can, and we'll be able to hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Oh,
Yes, as best of our ability, yes.
okay. I don't really have anything to say other than to thank you for the excellent presentation. I thought it was really, really thorough. I'm not sure how I'm going to report this all to the planning commission. It's actually so thorough that I will do the best job I can. But I just wanted to thank you all for the very thorough and excellent presentations on the options that will face council for either rate, or either rate flat or in both water. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that comment. And yes, again, thank you to Mr. Hamilton and the entire group for that great presentation. Any other questions or comments or opinions from the commissioners? Okay, well, thank you very much. This concludes this item. So we're now going to go to our fourth item on this list. It's the Wastewater System Annual Report. So we're going to have Ms. Flessy talk about it and give us her perspective on where we are and over the past year. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Keller and Commissioners. My name is Amanda Flessy. I am the wastewater system manager. And today I have with me Bradley Rare, and he's our collection superintendent. We are very excited to kind of change the mood and celebrate our wastewater collection system of 2019, pre-COVID-19. So we're excited to bring this report to you and tell you all the great things that we've been doing, what we had done the past year and where we're going to go in the future. Next slide, please. In our presentation, we'll go over the whole collection system, our information, our SSO history, our sanitary sewer overflow history, some sewer system maintenance programs that we've implemented the past few years and what they've done to our system and how we're able to use it. Everything that we possibly can, whether it's data maintenance and programs. Brad will go more into that. We'll also touch on our CIP program and and how that is adding to our overall maintenance and health of our system. And finally, we'll get into costs and what we did last year and how much that cost and how successful we were over the year. And it kind of ties into what Mr. Hamilton just presented. If we do cut those costs, if we don't get those increased, how that will probably impact our collection system program and our whole health of our collection system. So now I'm proud and honored to introduce Brad Rare, who will go over our whole collection system information. Brad?
Thank you, Ms. Flessy. Raquel, can you go back one slide? So before we get started, I would like to start with just looking at the picture we have on the screen, because this is really where this program all relies on, and it's the professional men and women who keep the wastewater collection system running every single day. And I'm happy to report that we have luckily been fortunate to have them come to work or, virtually work every single day since all the COVID-19 things began. So I want to give them the credit that they deserve. Next slide, Raquel. So I'd like to start by revisiting our collection system information. We have a system of approximately 257 miles of sewer mains. 90% of our gravity system is 6 or 8 inch sewer mains, which have their own difficult maintenance problems. And our system kind of operates like a bathtub. So the hills are in the Riviera and the outlying areas, the flow comes downhill to the lower areas, and in some cases needs to be pumped up over the hill by one of our 7 lift stations. We have approximately 2 miles of force main that the lift stations are connected to that ultimately discharge to gravity sewer lines that will carry the flow down to El Estero. Next slide. Can you tap one more time, Raquel? Thank you. So I'd like to start by looking at the past and how did we get to where we are today? So here's a chart showing the number of spills we've had since 2008, separated by the consent decree kind of date. And in the past, 2008, 2009, 2010, we had a significant number of spills. We were averaging about 38 spills a year. And that is not a good performance for a collection system of our size or age. And so, and prior to 2011, the city recognized that we had issues and we started hiring consultants to help us work on our maintenance practices. In April 2011, we Channel Keepers filed suit and basically took us to court regarding our spill performance and lack of doing our responsibilities of eliminating or minimizing spills in the collection system. So in May of 2012, we entered into a consent decree, and that consent decree mainly focused on a few things. One, developing our maintenance management systems to improve our performance, enhancing our capital improvement program, reducing our SSO sanitary sewer overflows so that we can get continued improvement. And so if each year we were in the consent decree, we had a spill performance goal. And if we did not meet that goal, we were also required to develop what we call a sanitary sewer overflow reduction action plan in order to identify additional measures and increase the amount of spending in order to help achieve our spill performance goal. But ultimately, the consent decree really had the focus of eliminating or minimizing our spills as much as possible and protecting the environment. So in the consent decree began in 2012, and the lines at each of the years you see on the graph in front of you are the spill performance goals. It was a tiered system where in 2012 it started out at 18, reduced down to 15 in 2013, 12 in 2014, 10 in 2015, and then it has been at 8 sanitary sewer overflows since 2016. In 2016, we sat down with Channel Keepers again and renegotiated the consent decree because there were still things that could be improved upon. And so it was amended in March 2017 and extended for an additional 3-year term, expiring on March 31st, 2020. So what I'd like to point out on this graph is that, as you can see, since 2012, there have been years that we've exceeded our spill count. But fortunately, over 4 out of the last 8 years, we have actually met our spill reduction goal. And this in 2019 was our 2nd year in a row of achieving that performance metric. So when you put this graph all together, prior to the consent decree, we were averaging 38. And in 2019, with only 4 spills, we basically reduced it almost down to 10% of the spills that we had prior to the consent decree. So I think that's a pretty good accomplishment for our team. Next slide. So to dive in a little deeper, maybe tap one more time, Raquel. Oh, go back, please. It looks like we're missing a label here, but to dive into our 2019 spills a little deeper, we had 4 spills. 3 out of the 4 spills were deemed root related, and 1 of our spills was due to what we call a structural issue or a structural defect. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the causes of those in a second. So out of our 3 root related spills, 1 was due to a defective joint that was out of repair, and unfortunately we did not clean it in time. And so that was a spill in March of 2019. The 2 other root-related spills were related to roots coming from a lateral, either connection or roots that had been discharged into our system, what we believe by a private plumber, doing lateral maintenance for a property owner. And that, unfortunately, that root dislodged itself, found a spot downstream in the collection system, and ultimately caused a spill. So I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of the sewer lateral inspection program, but When you look at the number of spills we have now, and 2 out of 3 of them are related to roots at lateral connections, it really shows the importance of still reaching out to the public and trying to work on our root-related issues. The structural spill was due to an offset joint that happened to be located directly above a defective storm drain pipe. And luckily, there was only 1 or 2 laterals connected to that pipe, but when it was discovered, staff immediately responded, performed all of our containment procedures, and minimized the impact of the spill. However, it still counted against us for last year. So, next slide. So looking at the impact of our spills on the environment, this chart shows the spill volume from 2012 through 2019. And you can see kind of from a general trending, we have definitely been trending down over the last several years. Our total volume spilled in 2019 was 705 gallons. However, of that 725 gallons, 562 gallons were recovered and returned to the sewer system. So that constitutes about 80% of the spill released was actually captured by staff and returned back into the sewer system and treated appropriately. So for the 143 gallons that were not recovered, 122 gallons were unrecovered and ultimately reached the waters of the U.S. because we weren't able to capture that or return it to the sewer system. Next slide. So in order to get these better metrics and performance for our spills, it really relies on our 4 key sewer system maintenance programs. And I'm going to talk more about these on the next slides, but those 4 programs are the cleaning program, the acoustic sounding program, our sewer lateral inspection program, and our fats, oils, and grease management program, or FOG, as we like to shorten it up. The pictures you see here, the one on the right is one of our operators using our combination sewer cleaning machine to clean a sewer main. And the picture on the left is one of our 4 video camera nozzles. So what you see on the front is a little camera that gets turned on and starts recording as the operator puts it in the sewer main, and it records what it sees in the sewer main. And we use this in our cleaning program now, and I'll talk a little bit more about how that is rolled into the different programs. Next slide. Something doesn't look right here. But this slide is really a timeline or the maintenance milestones that we've had for our various programs. Our staff have been busy since the beginning of the consent decree, implementing new maintenance measures in order to improve our performance. And we, in the various years, we've implemented and achieved these programs. And so I'm going to focus on our 2019 program, since you can't really see the timeline. But since we met our spill goal in 2018, we were not required to develop a sanitary sewer reduction action plan for 2019. And so the main focus from staff was to continue building upon the success of the programs that we had already developed and had been implementing for multiple years. And so our staff were able to really focus on increasing our cleaning QA/QC using visual camera findings from that nozzle camera that I just spoke about, as well as fine-tuning our acoustic sounding program and using that to help clean or help assess sewer mains that we might not be cleaning this year. We also have staff, our capital improvement coordinator continues to do a great job of coordinating with other maintenance groups within the city, specifically water and streets, in order to make sure that those capital projects, as they are doing a lot more work out in this system right now, don't adversely impact our collection team. And then because of all the success we've had over the last few years, we also we felt it was right to apply for the Collection System of the Year award from the state of California's California Water Environment Association. And as you can see over my right shoulder, that is the trophy that we were awarded for winning Collection System of the Year medium system. So that medium system is 250 to 500 miles. And we fall right into that category. Next slide.
Great job.
Thank you. So again, the labels here look a little funky, but the point here is that our entire cleaning program rests upon 2 main characteristics of each pipe. We have 6,275 pipes that staff are responsible for maintaining, and the cleaning program and cleaning frequency are the basis for how our software schedules those 6,200 pipes. It's important to note that we clean our sewer system using hydraulic jetting equipment at about 2,000 PSI. We start at the downstream manhole, and that pressure pushes our nozzle up to the upstream manhole, where we start cleaning the pipe and retrieving material in a basket at the downstream side. That, prior to about 2016, that was predominantly the information that we used in order to schedule our pipes for the appropriate frequency. However, in 2017, we realized that some of our cleaning findings might not be doing us the biggest favor, and we were actually missing some of the information. And so we ultimately added a couple different programs. And so in the green color, you can't see it on your screen, but it's our accelerated root control program. And currently we're sitting at about 42% of our system is in the accelerated root control program. And that's because there had been at least one cleaning finding or an inspection that shows that there are roots in that main. And we now need to clean that at a maximum of 12 months or treat it with chemical root control. For sewer mains that do not have any root findings, but cannot make it their longest duration, we have them in our accelerated cleaning program. And that was developed in 2013 in order to best manage our findings of debris and fog material. And so those pipes are allowed to go as long as 24 months. If the pipe has not had any history of any root findings or any debris, we can allow it to go to its maximum frequency. And for 6 and 8 inch pipes, we discovered that 6 and 8 inch pipes should not be going any longer than 36 months. And so we made that change in 2018. We stuck with it with 2019, and we're still catching up with the cleaning for that. But it's been one of the biggest factors that we believe in helping eliminate our spills. Next slide, Raquel. So as I said, the schedule is kind of determined by the cleaning program and the frequency. And so for our staff to keep up with the cleaning demand, we rely on our field crews of approximately 12 well-qualified collection system operators certified by the state of California. And we also rely on our contractors to support the cleaning in order to augment our field staff where we cannot keep with these peaks of cleaning demand. And so this chart shows the amount of cleaning since the beginning of the consent decree. And in 2019, we cleaned approximately 300 miles of our sewer system. This includes pipes that were cleaned at least once, but also maybe cleaned multiple times because of their frequencies. And so to put this in perspective, one thing that I talk to my staff about a lot is, what does this equate to if we stacked pipe up end to end? And cleaning 300 miles from the city of Santa Barbara, you would be cleaning a sewer system that would extend all the way down to Ensenada, Mexico. That's a lot of cleaning that we're getting accomplished, and we truly believe that that is a big portion of why our spill count is down. Next slide. One more. It's not just all about the cleaning more and more. It's also about where you're cleaning and what percentage of the system. So if you want to tap one more time, Raquel, there's also another animation here. We also track and report to channel keepers in the annual report how much of our system we're cleaning. So this slide on geographic cleaning miles shows if we've the amount of the system that has been cleaned at least once. And so we have a 257 mile system, and in 2019 we cleaned 183.6 miles of that system, which is approximately 71%. And you can see over the last 2 years that has been we've been sticking at that high number, and we believe that again that is also helping reduce our spills. Next slide. So cleaning root sewer mains every year is a pretty daunting task for staff. And so in 2014, we started using a contractor to apply chemical root foam to our selection of our sewer system. And we have approximately 31 miles of sewer main within that chemical root control program. And so what this allows our staff to do is defer maintenance that would typically be required at a maximum of every 12 months. Once we've chemically root treated it and we look at the findings, we can allow this main to be pushed back to 24 months or 36 months once it's been treated at least 2 times. So in 2019, we we chemically root treated 16.9 miles of our system. And the map on the left-hand side shows you kind of the distribution throughout the city. We typically apply this in easements up in the Riviera, up in the San Roque area, where there are a lot more trees and a lot more overgrowth over the sewer mains. And so this, we believe, is a successful program that will continue as much as we can in future years. And it complements our existing accelerated root control program nicely. Next slide. Another tool we use to manage our cleaning in our system is the acoustic sounding equipment that the city purchased in 2014. This diagnostic tool is a system designed to extend your cleaning resources, and it's really meant for 6 to 12 inch diameter sewer mains, and it's used to identify blockages of the system. And so the way it works is on one end of the pipe at one manhole, you place a transponder, and on the other end, you place a receiver. And it sends out a series of tones that the receiver is listening for. And depending on how many tones and which tones it hears, it returns a score from 0 to 10. 10 being pretty much fully clear, 0 being there might be a blockage. And so next slide. In 2019, we accomplished approximately 368 tests on sewer mains in our system, which is about 16.8 miles. And our team has put together a set of rules in our SOPs for if the sewer main returns a score less than 4, so 3, 2, 1, or 0, it indicates to us that there's probably a problem on the line and we need to go do further follow-up action. And so prior to 2018, we were just going out and cleaning it, looking at the cleaning findings and adjusting the frequency as necessary from that. But we've started using those camera nozzles to inspect the line prior to cleaning so that we can get a visual confirmation and pair that with our cleaning findings and allow our cleaning planner scheduler to use their best judgment on the frequency. We've also used that, you'll see the numbers are down a little bit in 2019 compared to 2018. And that's because we're using this more as kind of our insurance policy for sewer mains that we're not planning on cleaning this calendar year. So we will use this predominantly on 24-month and 36-month sewer mains that are not scheduled to be cleaned this year as kind of a reference check. And if it passes, we'll let it go to the next cleaning date. If it doesn't, we'll address it at that time and make decisions out of it. And so it's sort of this plan, do, check process that we've been implementing, and it seemed to be working for us. Next slide. So lastly, as part of our root-related maintenance programs, we have our sewer lateral inspection program. This program continues to be a really critical piece of our solution for managing roots and ensuring future success for our collection system, because the data shows that a majority of the spills we're having still are related to lateral roots. So whether they're coming in at the connection or being pushed down from the lateral from the plumber or homeowner performing maintenance, we really need to get a handle on that. And so this graph shows you the trend of our sewer lateral inspection program since 2014. In the blue bar shows you the number of letters that were sent out by our sewer lateral inspection team. The green shows the number of lateral connections, or what we call Ys, are being replaced in the system. And then the orange line is also the number of repairs that were done in the system. So to put this in perspective, we had 537 repairs made within our sewer lateral population last year. And out of 25,000 laterals, that's about 2% renewal of our laterals within the system. And so to keep that in mind, that kind of goes hand in hand with our capital program that we'll talk about in a few minutes. I also really want to make sure that, and I did this last year and I'm going to continue doing this, we recognize that this is a significant investment by the community, and it's really starting to help with preventing sewer spills from laterals. However, we know that there's still a lot of work left to be done, and there's a lot of cases out there that our staff are currently putting on hold right now while we're dealing with all the COVID-19 responses. And our staff are going to be using that time in order to follow up cases that we haven't heard about in a long time. or heard from if we're still waiting on something from them, but we're really not going to apply any pressure to have any of that work done. We just want to make sure that the community understands the importance of this program. Next slide, please. All right, great. So when you piece it all together and you overlay our geographic cleaning mileage out of our 257 miles with the total cleaning miles and the chemical route applied each year, and look at our route-related spills, you can see that the trend of the route-related spills has decreased over the past 8 years. This main reason, again, is because we believe we're getting more coverage, more percentage of the system is being looked at every year. We're also cleaning more of it, and we're also applying chemical where we strategically think that it will help us defer maintenance and better manage our system. And with the increased amount of sewer lateral inspection repairs done, we hope to see that this route-related spill number be minimized for future years. However, it's still going to take a lot of work from our team and the community members in order to achieve that. Next slide. Our debris-related maintenance programs that were implemented in 2012 and 2013 following the consent decree, as you can see from this graph, have kind of been all over the place. When you look at the data for the cleaning miles, the geographic cleaning miles and the total cleaning miles and overlay the SSO events, you'll see that there is no real trend. Part of that reason is because it doesn't necessarily follow a trend like the drought with roots or any of those other environmental factors. It really comes down to human behavior. And this is, again, why our team is working really hard right now to get the public messaging out on wipes, because these spills in the past are usually due to somebody discharging something that they should not be putting into the sewer system. And so we want to remind everyone that wipes clog pipes. They should really think what to flush before they flush the toilet, not afterwards, and make sure they're just focusing on the 3 Ps, pee, poo, and toilet paper. Next slide. So our other fats, oils, and grease management program that we have had in place for a number of years has also been a shining star for us. In 2014, we did an overhaul of our program. We hired a consultant to help develop some more BMPs and outreach materials, and we also hired a wastewater compliance specialist who has taken it upon himself to make sure he's not just getting out there every day, but he's getting out there and getting a coverage of the food service establishment population. And so in 2019, he made 601 site visits to food service establishments to educate them on, the impacts of discharging fog, but also ensuring that they're following the right best management practices for pumping out their grease control devices, dry wiping in the kitchens, and educating their staff on making sure that this is happening. And we were successful in not having a single fog-related spill in 2019 due to an FSE or even from the residential population. And so we're hoping that our message is also getting out there to them as well. And to put this in perspective, he, of those 601 site visits he made, he actually went to 376 of our 600 or so FSEs in town, and that's about 62% of the system. So he is also getting a good coverage of the food service establishments. He's also focusing on getting out to restaurants and food service establishments like grocery stores while they're in construction and they are tearing up floors or they're renovating buildings, because we found that by trying to get to the contractor and the operator while they've got that floor exposed, that's how we can make sure that the food service establishment operator is set up for success in the future. And so he's been spending an additional portion of his time as part of the building review process. So, next slide. So as Amanda talked about a little bit in the last presentation, as far as our capital improvement program and condition assessment, we've been using this capital improvement program and the increased mileage that you'll see in a second to really help manage the amount of additional cleaning that our staff are doing. Because if we're not investing in our capital and renewing pipe, it means we have to be maintaining it in order to minimize spills. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our our closed circuit television program, or our condition assessment program, and our capital improvement program, which we also in shorthand refer to as our R3 program, which is our repair, rehabilitate, or replacement renewal program. So next slide. So in 2019, we completed approximately 26.7 miles of our sewer main inspections using what we call PACP standards. PACP is Pipeline Assessment Certification Program, and it's put out by the National Association of Sanitary Sewer Companies, or NASCO. It's a national standard. It allows us to document the progressive failure of a pipe. So the way it works is every observation that's made on the pipe is given a score 0 to 5, 5 being a bad defect that needs to be addressed soon, and the pipe is in a failure mode, or a 0 meaning the pipe it's just an observation. It doesn't necessarily mean a structural score. Last year, there was approximately 5.8 miles of sewer mains with at least one grade 5 defect on the pipeline segment. And one thing I think it's important to note in this table is while it looks like we have approximately 15.8 miles of PACP 5s and 4s, the 15.8 miles of 5s and 4s, a lot of that inspection is being done because we are required to re-inspect those mains in order to monitor their deterioration. And this gives us an indication of how bad is our system looking structurally. Because we have to continue re-inspecting those, some of those 15.8 miles were rehabilitated in 2019, and ultimately their score would be reduced now to a 0. And so 26.7 miles were the total CCT inspections. However, about a mile and 1.1 miles of that 5 and 4 have been moved into the 0 category now, and so they're in a better shape. I also want to note that while preparing for the presentation, we discovered that the table had been copied over incorrectly into the report. And so we will be issuing an amendment to Channel Keepers next week with the revised table. This is the correct table and the correct data for 2019. Next slide. So we have a team of staff that use that PACP score and prioritization software to develop our capital improvement program list for each year. And we do an annual program targeting a minimum of 3.56 miles per year of pipeline renewal. And renewal includes the combination of repairs, rehabilitation, or replacement. And in 2019, the green bar, we completed 4.0 miles of sewer main renewal. Next, can you tap one more time, Raquel? As you can see, that yellow line, that's kind of our average over since the beginning of the consent decree. And so we've been averaging 4.76 miles, which equates to about 1.8% of our sewer system. We have that goal of 3.56 miles from the consent decree. However, our city council charter goal is 1%. And so we'll be looking at, as we exit the consent decree, what is the right amount of capital mileage moving forward. We do feel, though, that the kind of the average that we've been achieving over the last several years has really been helping us get across manage our cleaning effectively and renewing our system so that we're not having as many emergency repairs as we had in years past. And so I think this is an important slide to kind of mentally think about as we start discussing future decisions on funding. So with that, I'd like to pass the presentation back to Mrs. Flessy to finish it off for us.
Thank you, Mr. Rare. Next slide, please. So other notable activities, as Mr. Rare mentioned, we have multiple force mains. We have force mains in our system that move sewer from our lift stations to our gravity flow. One of our projects that we completed over the summer was our La Colina force main. If you remember, a few years back, we did a parallel line because we kind of showed that this was a single point of failure. As a force main, it's similar to water. You can't get in there and inspect the main. There's just no access points, and it's being pressurized, and so you can't get in there and inspect the main. Knowing that this main is from 1957, this pipe material, as Josh mentioned in the previous presentation, is just known not to be in great condition. So a couple of years ago, we put in a parallel line. We switched over to that parallel line, and then we were able to inspect this original 1957 main. So if you look at the picture over there to your left, you can tell how corroded that line was. So we were able to remove that complete line and then directional drill and put in a brand new line. And that project completed in September of 2019. And it was very successful. Next slide, please. Other notable activities is our SLIP program. As Mr. Rare noted, SLIP really directly impacts our collection system. And it is a very controversial item, and we needed to really update our public outreach and this whole program as a whole. We kind of consolidated a SLIP team, identified a SLIP team, and started moving from the technical portion into more of a public outreach and public messaging. So we hired on a couple of folks, and they are helping us with that public messaging, but also providing different options for the public. We implemented option 2, which was the white glove service at the end of the year of 19, and we were able to put that program together. That program was successful, was starting to pick up some momentum at the beginning of 2020 and the end of 2019. We had, I believe, about 9 people sign up and already pay for the repairs. We have noticed a significant reduction since COVID-19, but we're hoping that that will still be another option for the public. We've also really enhanced our website and a lot of our messaging, so it's clear to the public that private laterals are their responsibility. We've provided those items in English and in Spanish, and we've just really upped our presence and provided more one-on-one community outreach meetings, going out to high users like 8 different HOAs and the realtors, and trying to work with them and get their feedback on what they're hearing from the public as well. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Rare mentioned, we did nominate and receive Collection System of the Year for a medium system, not only for the Tri-Counties, which was that big trophy there that is being presented to us, but also for the state. We received that notification that we won this award in February, and we were supposed to go to the CWEA award ceremony the first week of April, but that obviously got canceled. So we will be receiving that award now in October. However, I do want to congratulate my entire staff. This staff I'm so thankful and so proud to represent this staff. This staff is just remarkable, and they really need to be commended because they are really part of the first responders. Not only have they been successful in 19, but they've also continued success in 2020. They've come to work every day. They respond no matter whether it is COVID-19, an earthquake, a mudslide, a flood. We are required to respond, and we should be really honoring our water and wastewater staff as first responders. They are pretty successful right now, being that no spills have occurred due to wipes just yet. thankfully, with all of their knowledge and technology and these programs that Mr. Rare and his staff have implemented over the few years, we've been really able to target and prevent any kinds of spills in this in our system. Next slide, please. So the consent decree costs, we had sort of obligations in our consent decree that we needed to put back into our system. We had to spend a certain amount in our capital, a certain amount in high risk, identified high risk pipes, and a certain amount in our operations. In 2017, we were allowed to switch our high risk capital and put that straight into our regular capital program. Last year, we were able to use $2.6 million in our capital program for various CCTV inspection, for rehab rehabilitation, point repairs, design, and really look at our program as a whole and start rating our system and how we're going to address not only fours and fives, but what is the biggest bang for our buck? So is it better to do a point repair and then that's going to reduce it from a 4 to a 0, or should we just rehab the whole pipe? So we were able to strategically do that, and so hopefully over 2020 we can start implementing that program. Can you advance one more, please, Raquel? So the total that we've spent for 19 was over $7 million, and that's in our operational and capital programs. So operations with this COVID-19, I'm hoping to keep moving forward and not really increase that much or decrease. If we were to take a hit, it would have to be in our capital program, and kind of reduced a lot of the contracts and that we would normally do in rehabilitating. Next slide, please. So as we move forward out of the consent decree and into the regular maintenance and operations, we plan on keeping a lot of the programs that we have developed over the year. And we do plan on bringing this annual report. We will switch this annual report back to fiscal year. So you'll probably be seeing this in September and October rather than now, where it was more calendar year and our report was due on March 31st. So that's probably the only kind of difference that we will be taking now that we're moving out of the consent decree. But in the future, what we're looking to is build upon this program that we have established. So now that we're doing really, really well with our SSOs and in our cleaning program, how else can we improve? One way we look at it is using technology, going more into the data realm of things, and we're receiving all this data now. What do we do with it, and sort of being strategic in that manner, putting our system knowledge to use. So we have a lot of folks that have been working on our system for quite a long time, and their knowledge is really imperative in making some of our top decisions of replacing or rehabilitation, or just maybe frequently cleaning or reducing the cleaning on items. So we really ask our staff to help us out and look at the data and what does that data mean to you. We would also like to focus more on our public outreach program. Now that we've really established our cleaning programs and our rehabilitation programs, the next part is the SLIP program. That is a big impact to our collection system. So really working with the public and working with our constituents on what to flush and the maintenance operations and who owns what, and looking at possible grant funding and additional funding options for for the public and the lower economy folks out there. Our SLIP program in fiscal 21, we are asking for additional employees, full-time employees for our SLIP program. We think that it's really imperative that these move forward because it is such a direct impact. Now, the financial impact is not as much because we're already using consultants in this realm, and we're using hourlies, and so we're kind of already spending that money now. So the budget wise, it's not that much of an impact in our fiscal year 21 impact, but we will want to move forward with just creating this program and really making it more robust so we can provide more public outreach. We can start looking into the grant funding and research and additional funding options for our constituents. We will continue to coordinate with other public works divisions. It seems to be really working, and I know that streets and water will continue to do work out there, and having that coordination with not only the public works division, but also the private side and the development side. Another item that's going to be coming to and probably impacting our collection system is the MICOS, which is let me see if I could get this right, the Micro Enterprise Home Kitchen Operations. So we know that the county and state have already approved this, and this is coming down the road, and probably with COVID-19, this is going to be more of an impact to our system. But we're hoping to just get the education out there that fog and down the drain is not acceptable, and it ends up creating an adverse impact and possible spill. But working with the county and working with these MICOS individuals is probably what we'll be focusing on as well in fiscal year 21. Next slide, please. So we are asking for Water Commission to recommend the approval of the Wastewater Collection System annual report and to move forward with to City Council for the presentation of and approval of the annual report. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer any. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fetzi and Mr. Renner, for that very great presentation. And I first, as part of the Water Commission, I really want to congratulate everybody, all the people on your staff, everybody that's been really making this happen for many, many years. And I think the awards that you received last year, even if you were not able to receive them in physically, it still is a great recognition of all the hard work that many people have been doing to make this happen. By channel keepers, but I think we're as something that's really important to keep going forward. Again, congratulations. I would like to open it up to any questions or comments from the commissioners.
Here, Keller?
Yes, Commissioner Young. Yes.
As the newbie on the commission, I just want to thank staff for a great report. It was very informative, comprehensive, and I learned a tremendous amount from it. So thank you.
Great. Councilmember Sneddon.
Thank you. Just a really quick comment, just having watched this over the last couple of years, such incredible work with what you've done with the SLIP program, with public outreach, with educating HOG, and I can't say enough how appreciative of what you've done, not just with the improvements, which are incredible, but in your outreach and all the iterations of the public facing figures and documents and getting those out there, and just really thank you. And I especially appreciate you calling out water and wastewater as first responders. I think that's just something that goes undervalued every day, and back to the idea that these are essential services that I think people really take for granted, the ability to turn on their tap, and just thank you. for what you're doing. Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
Oh, I'd just like to echo Councilmember Snedden's comments. Doing a great job, and I appreciate the update and very informative. And congratulations.
Great. Very much, Commissioner Davis.
Do we have any public comment? Because I'm ready to make a motion.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's a comment, then we'll go to the motion. But any comments from the public at this stage?
Chair Keller, I don't see any hands raised, so no public comment for this item.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So Commissioner Davis, can you please make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion. Approval of the report is submitted and to forward the report to council. And as part of the motion, the second part, the commission wishes to recognize and thank water and wastewater staff as their first responder positions and unsung community heroes.
Do we have a second?
I will second that for sure.
So Commissioner Secretary.
Okay, I will do roll call. Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kilborn,
Yes.
and Chair Keller.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And so this concludes this item. So we have a short amount of time left, but Mr. Heikmark, if you can give us the water resources report. Somehow we managed to use up all the time. We had the 3 hours, but please go ahead.
Yes. Well, I want to start off. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation before, but yes, I do appreciate all the hard work of our wastewater operators. The passion that team brings to their job is remarkable. They really do take a lot of pride, and it shows. It's nice to have the data that shows the pride that they put into it, and just proud to be part of an organization with that kind of just commitment to this community. So with that, I'll just jump right into the production data. I want to point out just a few things. The March balance for Kachuma. We do have an enormous amount of water in Kachuma that belongs to the city. It's fantastic. And we will be working, as I mentioned earlier, we're working on a water supply update that we will be bringing to the Water Commission in May for an in-depth discussion about that. Also noting on here, we have all our groundwater production is off. You'll notice desal, we had planned for the desal plant to be off. As you may recall, there were some repairs that need to be made to the intake pipeline, particularly in those transition fittings that are located on the beach. The contractor is responsible for making those repairs, and the city was responsible for getting a coastal development permit. And unfortunately, the Coastal Commission has been struggling with COVID-19 issues. I don't know if you saw, they had an actual outbreak at the meeting. One of the commissioners, the chair, was actually sick at the time and got a few of the other commissioners sick as well. And so anyway, we are eagerly waiting for the Coastal Commission to return to business as normal and hopefully approve our permit and get that project underway, which probably will be in the fall at this point. Next slide. 12-month running average, kind of staying kind of steady. I think establishing, well, what we're looking for is establishing of our new norm. I think the certain pandemic is going to cause a different drop, but we'll continue to track our overall 12-month running average here. Next slide. As you may recall, we had a goal by end of 2020 to reduce our consumption down to 117 gallons per capita per day. The community is at 90, well below the required target, and everything has been looking good related to these our efforts to reduce water usage. Next slide. We continue to track our water usage as it compares to the last drought of record. And as you can see with where we are right now, the reservoir is, we're in year 9 since it last spilled. And I don't think we're going to see it spill this year, but we got pretty close. I think the reservoir is at 80% of capacity right now. Next slide. Wastewater flows. So we're tracking this pretty closely. This is a good indicator of water usage and the health of the community. What we're seeing right now, and again, that's an average of 5.9 for the month of March, but it looks like wastewater flows have dropped by about 1 million gallons a day as a result of the shutdown. So we'll be looking at that. Likely is correlated mostly with our loss of commercial and industrial usage. Next slide. Recycled water, I want to just 2 points here. We have been in communication with Lacumbra Mutual Water Company, who is still interested in purchasing recycled water on a long-term basis from the city. So we'll be continuing to move forward. We have approximately, at the peak of our demands, still have about 50 acre-feet of available water that we could sell. This agreement with Lacumbra is a lot smaller than that. It's looking at between 30 and 100 acre-feet a year. So I think we have confirmed now that we have the capacity to meet those needs. So we'll be working with Lacumbra on that, and we'll bring back an agreement once we have something on that. I don't have a timeline right now on that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Before I go into that, let me just step back. I did want a special recognition here of Raquel Becerra, our meeting magic behind the scenes. The commission secretary, she is amazing. I can't tell you, we've all been going through a lot here in learning our new roles, and basically feel like I started a new job in some ways. And Raquel has really taken ownership of making sure that we get the Water Commission back up and running. It's been a priority for her, and she's really taken ownership of this. And I just really commend her for all the work she's done on this. I also want to thank the GoToMeeting folks who have really stepped up too. Leah is on the phone, and she's been just making sure the meeting goes off smoothly today. And then of course our city clerk, who is also Sarah Gorman, who is also helpful at providing time for Raquel and I to get some training. And then Matt Four in the city administrator's office. And then of course, Tony Ruggieri in our city TV, who's making this all available to the public. Really just, it's been a team effort and a lot of work behind the scenes. And it's really underscored. I'm glad we have this opportunity. It's kind of startling to see something like a pandemic really bring our democracy to a quick halt, and being able to get our public meetings back on track and be able to communicate again with our public is just really important. And I commend all of those who've been participating for all their help. So with that, turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Very much. And again, yes, congratulations and thanks to all of them. So we have a short time for maybe some questions or comments from the commissioners or our council member. Questions or comments on this item from the public? And I also wanted to thank, yes,
no
please.
public comment.
I also wanted to thank Raquel for preparing a very clear way for me to ask every single one of these points. I mean, that was really very helpful. Anyway, so I think this concludes this item, and basically this will be the conclusion of this meeting. I think it was quite successful in terms of how we were able to do it. Our next meeting will be Thursday, May 21st at 9 a.m. And we'll be sending out the information to be able to log in because it will, again, will be a GoToWebinar. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for your participation, and stay safe, stay positive, and test negative. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.